All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Straight Talk, and we got another one. If I was not convinced about the efficacy, the seriousness of Africa on the continent and elsewhere in the world, tonight is one. I'm here to tell you, I am beyond ecstatic. I guess that's the word. Beyond excited. Beyond the point where I know the Moors are black, are back. They're black too. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're just going to take it over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. That stranglehold of the black man and woman upon the world is over. Two things that are at play: the West, that consists of America and Europe and Canada. I guess you're going to want to add that to it, versus the global South, BRICS. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, 32 nations are about to join BRICS. And who is at the head of the table? Africa. Who had the greater resources? Africa. Who had the greatest number of people? Africa. But it's not just Africa by itself. It is a union between those 32 nations that want to join BRICS and what that means. God, man, the more I think about this, the more I know it's over. It's like the hare and the tortoise, the turtle, the tortoise, whatever. But the story: Africa and black folks worldwide are the turtle or the tortoise, and white people have been and still are the rabbit. And so the rabbit takes off at the beginning of the race, and with this 400-year head start, they figure, well, we'll never catch up. Black folk in the global South will never account for anything. And you know the end. You know the end of the story. The tortoise wins. And by the time the rabbit wakes up, it's over with. We're already at the finish line. That white boy done went to sleep. And we're done. We won. But tonight you're gonna see that. Tonight you're gonna see everything that I know that I have been able to dig up. And thank God I don't have to be doing too much digging. With SABN, I would highly recommend that people see and subscribe, excuse me, to SABN. And they have another host, Bruce Hungway. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But a beautiful, beautiful, well done YouTube channel. So I would highly recommend that you guys check that out. And we are on our way. Africa is only dealing with the world with Afro. The transaction is instantaneous. It's not even a second. So if America and Europe, including Italy and Germany and the UK, want to do business with Africa and its resources, want to buy it, if you ain't got no gold, baby, you got to get the fuck on, because that's it. And you know what that means? That's a fucking stranglehold on the world. Afro Gold, Afronet, Afro Waters, because now the warship of Africa stopped America from entering the Indian Ocean. And the, what do you call it, the Aden, something of Aden, uh, and in the Atlantic Ocean, where they sank a United Nations warship, comfortably laying on the ocean with all of its inhabitants, tucked away peacefully. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at the global south. That includes the base of it, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America. But now you might as well just say all of Africa, because now it's the United States of Africa. And what that means globally speaking, and what that means to the West. But first, I want to cover something that I had shown before that deal with white people and their hold on, let me pull this up because I don't want to screw it up and then miss out on or touching the video in error and taking them off the screen. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to play this video, and it's the white man, which what I call the white boy because he's not a man. Men don't go around fucking up everything. Men don't go around killing everybody. So we're dealing with a little boy with a little mindset of a 10-year-old that if he doesn't get what he wants, he just fucks it up and cuts it up and makes shit up. All right. So it's almost a 4-minute video, and I will be right back. Now, hold on. This is awfully telling. If this isn't the whiteboard, I don't know what is. They have no civilization, they have no culture, they have no nothing that they can say that they did. They've only brought four things to the table: death, destruction, disease, and despair. That's it. The world is sick and tired of being sick and tired of these people. Even their own women are saying that white boys are just mediocre, playing the Wizard of Oz game, blowing smoke up everybody's asses, and making themselves out to be more than what they are. It doesn't take much to see that or to recognize that. You just need to pull back the curtain and know that it's bullshit. One of the things that I talk about in my book called The White Man's Burden of Lies and Deceit, 1 and 2, is that very thing. The history of these people don't have one. They come from Dravidian albino that made it with normal black people that get this octoroon kind of look to them. That the white people that we see now, like Trump and his kids and other people. They don't come from Europe. They're not European, Anglo-Saxon, Saxon, Caucasian, white. Being white back in the day meant that you had some type of authority and land and money. There were a lot more black people who were white or considered white. It was a status than the so-called pale skin. And black people were not slaves in America. We were prisoners of war. There were more black people being shipped out of America than coming in. I'll grab that one for you. So we're going to go on and take a deeper look into what is going on with Africa, because Africa is not playing. They have it now where you can get your passport, African passport. Está muy fuerte, muy rápido. ¿Qué pasa? You can get your African passport to go anywhere on the continent. Plus, they're setting aside $100 billion for all Caribbean, Black, American, and other people around the globe to come back home. Go figure. So, like I said, we're going to take a look now and get it moving. And the next one deals with India strikes a U.S. $101 billion military deal with one Africa government. I'll be right back.
Supreme Family greeting. I am Bruce Humbly, your new news anchor here on Sapien, now working alongside my brother Takunda Mabika. Together, we are building something bigger than news, a space for truth, for insight, and for understanding the forces shaping Africa and the world. I have insiders inside the U.S. government, Chinese Communist Party, and across the African Union, bringing information you will not see anywhere else. Today, we are talking about something monumental. India is entering a $101 billion strategic partnership with the African Union, focusing on defense, technology, infrastructure, and continental capacity building. This is Africa asserting its agency on the global stage, and the world is watching. Africa has been quietly preparing for continental integration. The One Africa government is no longer an idea. It is a reality in motion. Washington watches, Beijing calculates, and New Delhi is positioning itself as a long-term strategic partner. Every briefing, every grant, and every policy is now being viewed in the context of Africa's rise. The world is recalibrating, but Africa is not reacting. Africa is moving on its own terms. The deal with India is not a single transaction. It is a composite of multiple agreements over several years. It includes military training programs across the continent, technology transfer for cyber defense and communications networks, joint development of infrastructure.
If you're hearing these words, it's not a coincidence. Something powerful is moving in the
logistics systems, and continental security programs. It also includes scholarships, research partnerships, and industrial collaborations that will create jobs and strengthen Africa's technological independence. Every component of this deal has African oversight. We decide how it is structured. We decide how it is implemented. This is Africa leading. Africa's rise is drawing attention from every corner of the world. Global powers are monitoring our moves closely because they understand that a unified Africa is a force that cannot be ignored. India's involvement is part of a broader strategy to strengthen ties with the global South, recognizing Africa as a partner shaping the future. The United States, China, and India are all involved, but Africa remains the player and the chessboard. Africa is defining the rules. Africa is taking the lead. The investments are strategic and tangible. Military training programs will build continental defensive capacity while fostering cooperation between nations. Technology transfer will secure African communications networks and cyber defense systems, connecting capitals and government agencies. India will also partner with local African companies to develop manufacturing capacity for defense and infrastructure projects. Every program strengthens our people, our skills, and our independence. Africa is building systems with African oversight, even when foreign expertise is involved. February 2026 is a turning point. The African Union will publicly
Yes,
reveal the
sir.
full structure of the One Africa government, including integrated defense, finance, and digital systems. India's partnership is aligned with this plan, providing expertise, technology, and investment without compromising sovereignty. Africa is choosing its partners. Africa is asserting its independence. Africa is rising. Economic independence is at the heart of this deal. The $101 billion investment will strengthen continental infrastructure, including trade corridors, energy distribution, and secure communication networks. Pan-African digital identity systems and financial platforms will be reinforced, reducing reliance on foreign powers. This is not aid. This is strategic collaboration on Africa's terms. Africa is negotiating from strength, ensuring every dollar benefits the continent and its people. This partnership is also about human capital. African engineers, cybersecurity specialists, defense strategists, and administrative experts will participate in training programs in India and across the continent. Scholarships and research collaborations ensure that the knowledge stays in Africa. Africa is preparing its people to manage its own systems. Africa is creating capacity, knowledge, and independence. Global powers are aware of the shift. The United States is watching closely because it understands that Africa's strategic partnerships increase leverage on the world stage. China is observing, recalibrating its investments and influence in response to India's engagement. Africa is not waiting for approval or permission. Africa is setting the terms of engagement and choosing partners deliberately. This is the rise of the South, and it is happening now. The strategic infrastructure supported by this deal includes secure digital networks linking capitals, command and control systems, logistics, and integrated defense training programs. These investments create the foundation for a unified Africa that can act collectively while maintaining national sovereignty. Technology is the backbone of our rise, ensuring security, efficiency, and cohesion. Africa is building a continent capable of managing itself at every level. Africa's story is not only about money or contracts, it is about mindset. We are asserting independence, building skills, strengthening governance, and creating infrastructure designed for our needs. Every African involved in these projects is shaping the future. Africa is creating the knowledge, capacity, and systems to ensure our destiny is in African hands. This is empowerment. This is pride. This is Pan-African vision in action. The symbolism is powerful. Partnering with India, a rising global power, sends a clear message. Africa engages with the global South as an equal partner. We are negotiating multi-billion-dollar deals while retaining control. Africa is no longer confined to a passive role in global geopolitics. Africa is rising on its own terms. This is continental pride and agency manifest. The US $101 billion figure is cumulative, reflecting multiple sectors and long-term investment. It is real, it is tangible, and it is achievable. Military training, technology transfer, infrastructure development. Human capital programs and industrial partnerships all contribute to this number. Every element is strategically designed to strengthen Africa's independence and continental integration. By diversifying our partnerships, Africa is creating leverage
Hold on.
and asserting influence. February 2026 will mark the public launch of the One Africa government. It will showcase integrated systems for defense, finance, and digital governance. India's partnership is one of many strategic collaborations positioning Africa as a center of power, influence, and progress. Africa leads, Africa decides, Africa wins. Africa's rise is not abstract. Engineers, strategists, military officers, and technologists are participating in projects that will shape the continent for decades. Africa is creating skills, infrastructure, and knowledge that will remain in African hands. Every investment, every program, and every partnership strengthens African sovereignty. This is a continent taking control of its future, and the world is watching. Supreme family, the world can observe, but Africa is setting the narrative. Strategic partnerships, careful planning, and continental integration demonstrate that Africa is ready to lead. The One Africa government is not a dream. It is a plan being executed in real time, and India's $201 billion engagement is a concrete step toward realizing. Africa is negotiating, Africa is building, Africa is rising. This is the rise of the South. Africa is no longer waiting for permission or recognition. We are diversifying partnerships, building integrated systems, training our people, and preparing for a future where the continent acts collectively, strategically, and with pride. February 2026 will mark the moment Africa demonstrates agency, strength, and vision to the world. The world is watching, and they should be. Africa is acting. Africa is leading. Africa is winning. Every African should understand the significance. These investments, collaborations, and strategic partnerships are not abstract numbers or distant policies. They impact jobs, technology, governance, defense, and continental infrastructure. Africa is creating a system designed for its people, with African oversight and control. This is empowerment, independence, and pride manifest. Supreme family, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Join the conversation, leave your thoughts in the comments, and connect with us. This channel is for Pan-African people everywhere who want insight, truth, and a seat at the table as Africa shapes its destiny. I am Bruce Hungley, and this is just the beginning. Africa is rising, and we are all part of this story.
All right, this is just one part. You won't be able to, you're not going to be able to understand or what I'm looking for. You're not going to believe what I have to present tonight. And the next video is the world is watching Africa, and they are already preparing for our one government. You're not going to believe what I got, and it's just mind blowing that. And I can understand CNN, CBS, ABC, all of the major MSNBC. They're not going to tell you white folks ain't shit. That Africa is on the way up. That Africa is going to be running everything. They're not. So we're going to go on to the next video for about 7 minutes, and I'll be right back.
Bruce Hungley, Supreme family greetings. I am Bruce Hungley, your new news anchor here on Sapien, now working alongside my brother Takunda Mafika. Together we are building something bigger than space for truth, for understanding, and for thinking about the forces shaping Africa and the world. I have insiders from the U.S. government, from the Chinese Communist Party, and from across the continent, bringing you information you will not see anywhere else. Today, we talk about something that will define Africa for generations, the One Africa government, and the moves that the world is already making in response. Washington watches, Beijing calculates, and Addis Ababa is quietly preparing. The world is paying attention to Africa, and it is not because they doubt us, it is because they know what is coming. What is coming is Africa taking its rightful place. David Langston from the U.S. State Department Africa Desk tells ABN that the United States is not waiting for 2026. Every policy, every grant, and every meeting is designed to anticipate what Africa will do when the One Africa government is officially unveiled.
And they can't
Every
stop it.
document, every briefing, every strategy is about positioning and understanding a rising Africa. Supreme Family, they are already preparing for us, and yet most of the continent does not even realize it. Internal AFRICOM documents show a renewed focus on monitoring continental integration initiatives. Funding lines that were dedicated to security training are now being reallocated toward African Union digital governance systems. Leaked think tank memos indicate that Washington is assessing African economic consolidation as a pivot point in global trade. This is not fear-mongering. This is acknowledgement. The United States recognizes that Africa is moving, and they are mapping the continent's trajectory in advance. Li Wei, a source inside the Chinese Communist Party's African Strategy Office, tells SFBN that China is investing in continental digital infrastructure, cloud systems, and data networks. These are long-term
Voy a
strategic
preparar un
bets,
fideo
timed to
con huevo.
coincide with African Union integration initiatives. Contracts show Chinese firms building AUI cloud systems capable of hosting government, finance, and digital ID platforms. High-speed rail and technology corridors are being designed not only for transport, but for network connectivity linking capitals, all aligning with the AU's 2026 roadmap. This is strategic planning.
Now remember, the guy named Chickambuso who got the, and it's real. He had the energy where you don't need to plug in anything, and it runs off the RF energy in the air. It's going to make Africa like night and day.
Not control. Africa is negotiating terms and asserting sovereignty while the world watches. Amina Toure at the African Union explains that preparations for 2026 are more than ceremonial. Departments are aligning, digital ID systems are being tested, and financial frameworks are being centralized. The first formal announcements will happen in February 2026. Public tenders show continental-scale contracts for secure communications, server infrastructure, and Pan-African digital identity platforms. Diplomatic visits from Washington and Beijing have increased, showing that global powers are closely monitoring African movement. This is Africa quietly rebuilding itself, and the world is reacting, not controlling. Daniel Wanda, an African tech consultant, explains that the African Union's digital backbone is not just a database. It is a platform that can integrate finance, governance, and logistics across borders. Whoever controls that system wields influence. But Africa is building it with African oversight. The continent is designing systems for security, currency, and governance. Even if foreign contractors provide hardware, continent-wide coordination, unlike fragmented regions, creates economies of scale, unified trade policy, and cross-border collaboration. This is Africa's hidden advantage. The United States and China are not just funding projects. They are running simulations, building contingency plans, and monitoring outcomes because they recognize Africa as a new center of gravity in global politics. U.S. grants to AU financial initiatives quietly lobby multilateral partners to adopt standards favorable to U.S. interests. Strategic loans from China to key infrastructure corridors, with tech transfer programs and training for AU IT staff, show that both powers are observing, testing influence, and negotiating access. Africa is aware. They are not passive participants. Africa is a player. Africa is shaping the rules. February 2026 is the turning point. Internal documents indicate that the AU will formally reveal a framework for continental integration, political, economic, and digital. The United States and China are planning policy and media responses to coincide with the announcement. This is the first public moment Africa will assert agency, not quietly in briefings, not subtly in memos, but fully in public. When that happens, the world will see that Africa is not reacting. Africa is leading. Supreme Family, this is not a story of fear. This is a story of African agency and pride. Economic independence will come through the AU digital framework, continental currency integration, unified trade policy, and streamlined governance. Pan-African tech systems under African oversight will reduce dependence on foreign actors. Recognition from U.S. Frost and Chinese insiders confirms that Africa's future is non-negotiable, inevitable, and sovereign. This is Africa rising. The world is watching, and they should be. Africa is acting. Africa is leading. Africa's winning. Supreme family, you are part of this story. Africa's preparing for 2026. But the real change happens when Africans everywhere understand their power. When we know what is coming, we can shape it, protect it, and own it. Follow AU updates, observe continental projects, share awareness of African-led initiatives in tech, governance, and finance, discuss, debate, and educate. Pan-African networks amplify agency. They call it strategy, they call it preparation. But Africa is not waiting. Africa is rising. February 2026 will not be a date to fear. It will be a date to celebrate. The world is watching, and they will see Africa not just participating in history. Africa is writing it. They think they can predict us. Only plan that matters is ours. Africa leads. Africa decides. Africa wins. Remember, Supreme Family, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Join the conversation, leave your thoughts in the comments, and connect with us because this channel is for Pan-African people everywhere who want to know the truth and be part of the story. I am Bruce Huntley, and this is just the beginning.
Guys, let me share something with you that I've heard and seen. That we all know that the CIA, NSA, FBI, you name it, in America. And you got the Navy SEALs, and you got the Green Beret, Red Beret, something like that. And then you got the Mossad. Mossad, and then you got the MI6. Do you know that Africa now has 5,000 people who have gone through a rigorous program to become a Black Panther? It is unreal as to what is happening, and has its own CIA. It's mind-boggling, and there'd be no way that we're going back. The whole world is belong to us. And the first video that I showed you, where the white man is going throughout the world just fucking shit up, turning justice into injustice, injustice into justice, and the whole nine, we are going to see all of that reversed. It is important that our ancestors speak and act through us. Act through us. The Moors are back. It is incumbent upon us, and it is our responsibility to set the world back on balance, and to criminalize, and to chastise, and to punish, and to perhaps even kill those who have been in power, the white boy, whoever that may be, bring them to justice. BlackRock and other entities. It is absolutely positively ridiculous that they don't have the wherewithal to stop. Like nobody ain't gonna say shit. Like nobody ain't gonna do shit. Like nobody don't have the fucking balls and dick to do anything. Why, you got another thing coming, buddy. You got another thing coming. And it is here. And it is now. And we ain't playing. The black man gonna beat your motherfucking ass as well as the black woman, because you have gone way off track. Karma is a bitch. You reap what you sow, motherfucker. And so shall you reap. Justice might be slow in coming, but when it is here, it is all but destroyed. It is coming to break your motherfucking head open, block your eye, bust your nose, break all your teeth, everything. You're not gonna have shit. Nothing. So let's go on and try to knock these out. And here we have a sister, black folks owe you nothing. You owe us. And you know what? We're gonna get our money. Hook or crook, we're gonna get our fucking money. Cause we're gonna put that gun to their motherfucking head. The political gun, the economic gun, the spiritual gun, and the physical one. But they don't want that heat. They don't want that smoke. I'll be right back.
For the youth in this country that is not Black American owes us for the sacrifices that we made to ensure that you have rights in this country. Rights that we aren't even afforded half the time. No one will rewrite our history as if my people didn't die bloody in these streets for centuries. My people were enslaved, imprisoned, and assassinated so that all minority groups could vote, go to school, get loans, paid employment other than manual labor, the right to run for office, the right to marry outside of your race. And yet, we are still being unalived for being unarmed and black at the same time. Just ask the families.
Arm up, motherfucker. Get your goddamn pistol.
Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, Walter Scott, Eric Gardner, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tamir Rice, George Floyd, and the countless others that didn't get a hashtag. Because police are trained to see us as the enemy. Because they were created to be slave catchers. My people fought through the bloodbath that was chattel slavery, the black codes, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the civil rights movement. Our leaders were assassinated, imprisoned, or pushed out of the country. We've been put on the front lines of every war this country has ever been a part of, even while being enslaved, only to return to a country that treated us like second-class citizens. We had our successful communities, like Black Wall Street, bombed and destroyed out of racist jealousy. And then this country did it again in 1985, when the police bombed a black neighborhood in West Philadelphia, where 11 black folks died, including 5 black children, 60 homes destroyed, because they were organizing for black liberation. And let's not forget the war on drugs, where instead of calling it a health crisis for the black community, like they did for the white community, when crack hit our streets, this society, along with the help of President Nixon, Reagan, Bush 1, and Bill Clinton, the Republicans and the Democrats used policy to fill up their federal and private prisons with black fathers and mothers that were addicted to drugs. Why? To create a trillion-dollar business known as the prison industrial complex. There is overwhelming evidence that the justice system is rarely just for black folks. We get longer sentences for the same crimes as everyone else. Higher bail rates. Our schools get less funding than every other community. We get paid less for doing the same jobs. All the medical advancements in gynecology came from the torturous experiments done to black women. They endured this torture with no anesthesia, and this went on for decades. And let's not forget the deadly experiments this government did on our black men during the Tuskegee syphilis study that also went on for decades and didn't stop until the 70s. And then you're also quick to say, we have no culture, trying to gaslight us again, because we are the culture that is exploited by every other group that y'all steal from and monetize all over the world. Recently, the FBI did a study that proves that white hate groups are the biggest threat to this so-called democracy, not black folks. All the massacres in this country have one common denominator, and it ain't us. And despite all the hate that comes our way daily, we have consistently done what was necessary. We did our job. We voted for the black woman because that was what was best for the country. And your mix of delusional white supremacy and anti-blackness led you to vote for the orange racist idiot that brought all this chaos, the chaos that we told y'all would come along with this fascist regime of loyalists. And with all this, my people still don't have equality in this country. No political power, no economic power in this country that we built and died for. Our blood is in this soil, and a debt never paid is owed to us, not the other way around. And why is this allowed? Because this country protects white billionaires so they can own all the major media outlets, which means they have control over what? The narrative. And they also have control over the majority of these corrupt government elected officials on both sides of the aisle. And their strategy has been the same since they came upon our shores of Africa, looking for free labor, divide, and conquer, which is why they created race to begin with, so they could have a power structure based on color, where black folks would always be at the bottom and they would be at the top. So now proximity to whiteness becomes power, even within other minority groups, so that Latinos, Indians, Asians, and even some Africans could be racist against black Americans in an effort to get treated just a little bit better by the majority white population. Divide and conquer. Thanks for falling for it. Thanks for the betrayal that prolongs all of our suffering. That's how we get colorism, classism, and every other negative ism. But y'all have the audacity to demand that we stand on the front lines for you because you're being treated like we've always been treated, while you refuse to ever stand with us. Go sit down. Fred Hampton tried to build a coalition with the Latinos, the Asians, and the poor whites, and the FBI took him out for it. And all those groups ran from any association to the Black Panthers and left them to be massacred and jailed. This is why it's so important to know your Black history. That's how I know what not to do this time around. Or maybe you're one of those Ezra Klein types that has no idea and has no empathy for the treacherous terrain we have to walk through being black in America. The audacity of trying to tell us how to feel about a racist when a racist gets taken out by another racist who didn't think he was racist enough. Understand this. Y'all will not gaslight us onto these streets to be easy targets for these Second Amendment freaks who have been given the green light by Trump the Chump and his Department of War. That's the orange idiot y'all voted for, not us. The priority for black folks must be to destroy the self-hate that plagues our community due to the hundreds of years of oppression. Now, for those of you in the U.S. and abroad who are members of the BRC, be sure to check your emails this week because we have an important meeting coming up. As always, I love you, Black men. I love you, Black men. Knowledge is power, power to the people.
You got that goddamn right. Because this thing is about to flip. You understand what I'm telling you? It is about to fucking flip. We are in control economically. And like I said, it'll be about power, economic power first. And to be honest with you, it won't be necessary to fire not one motherfucking missile or bullet. Now, unless it's absolutely positively necessary. But I can tell you here right now, it's not. Because Europe has to have petroleum, oil. Do you know who is running the oil now? Who is in control of oil? Africa. In charge of the Mediterranean, in charge of the Red Sea, in charge of I think it's that Sea of Aden, something like that. Took control of the Suez Canal. Nobody can fish in the Atlantic Ocean unless they get permission from Africa. Africa just told the most powerful military on the planet, get the fuck out of here. Don't bring your ass back over here no more. In the Indian Ocean, motherfucker. You gonna see that shit? We are on the right. It's just gonna get tighter and tighter. Nah, this is just some extra shit. I'm just saying. You know how white folks were when they took over Japan and took over Africa. They had their way without women. But now the script has been flipped. White women don't want your little dick ass. They want the BBC. I'm just saying. That all of what this is about is what that is about. Period. So, among other things, so I just want to make sure that is understood and what the hell that means and how that means and why that means. This is a global power shift. And I mean shift. So the next one is bomb. African Union bans dollar payments for natural resources. AfroGold now mandatory. We don't want no monopoly money from Europe, from America, from Canada. They have nothing backing it. Let's go.
Bomb. African Union bans dollar payments for natural resources. AfroGold now mandatory. By Takunda Mabikrim, Africa Breaking News. Tisubanhu Bacho, Supreme Family. Today's leak isn't just another headline. It's the start of a global financial earthquake. According to a classified AU economic directive obtained exclusively by SABN, the African Union has quietly approved a policy that will ban U.S. dollar payments for all African natural resource exports starting in 2026. And in its place, the continent's long-whispered gold-backed currency, AfroGold, will become the only accepted payment instrument. The directive, codenamed Operation Golden Gate, is stamped with the seal of the AU Economic Security Council and marked top secret. It outlines a continental strategy that insiders say will completely rewrite how the world buys Africa's resources. And for Washington, London, and Brussels, this could be their worst nightmare come true. Part 1, the leak. Operation Golden Gate. The leaked 67-page policy memo reveals that the AU has formally passed the Continental Resource Payment Act, CRPA, legislation that prohibits the sale of strategic commodities like oil, gold, cobalt, lithium, uranium, and even agricultural bulk exports in US dollars, euros, or pounds. Instead, AfroGold, the African Union's gold-backed digital and physical currency, will become the sole settlement unit for all cross-border trade in natural resources. The language of the document is blunt. Dollar dominance in Africa's resource trade is a structural vulnerability and a strategic risk to continental sovereignty. AfroGold will neutralize that risk. Insiders tell SABN that this decision was not taken lightly. It's the culmination of more than a decade of AU economic planning and represents the boldest move yet in Africa's long-term strategy to reclaim control over its wealth. Part 2, the why. Breaking the chains of dollar dependence. For decades, Africa's wealth has been priced, sold, and settled in foreign currencies. Over 88% of Africa's resource exports are denominated in US dollars, a system that gives Washington enormous leverage over African economies. When the US Federal Reserve raises interest rates, Africa pays more for imports. When sanctions are imposed, payments for African exports can be blocked or delayed. And when the dollar strengthens, the value of African commodities often plummets, even when demand is high. Economists across the continent have argued for years that this system is a form of financial colonialism. The new directive is Africa's answer. If you want our cobalt, our oil, our rare earths, you'll pay in our money. Part 3, the plan, a 4-phase transition. The leaked document outlines a carefully staged rollout designed to avoid market shocks and give global buyers time to adjust. Phase 1, 2025. AfroGold clearing accounts open in the central banks of 25 AU member states. Pilot transactions begin in oil and gold. Phase 2, 2026. All new commodity contracts must include AfroGold payment clauses. Dollar and euro transactions will no longer be accepted for newly signed deals. Phase 3, 2027. Legacy contracts renegotiated under AfroGold settlement terms. Phase 4, 2028, complete ban on foreign currency payments for natural resources continent-wide. Sources inside the AU Central Bank tell SFBN that negotiations with major buyers like China, India, and Turkey are already well underway, and all three have signaled their willingness to switch to Afrogold. Part 4, the infrastructure, Afrotrade Settlement Network, ATSN. To make this seismic shift possible, the AU has built a new digital payment infrastructure called the Afrotrade Settlement Network, ATSN, a blockchain-based platform integrated with Afrogold reserves. The system allows buyers anywhere in the world to convert their local currencies into Afrogold instantly and settle transactions directly with African suppliers. The ATSN is also linked to the Afronet Digital Cloud, ensuring that all transactions are transparent, traceable, and immune to external sanctions. A senior AU tech advisor described it as the SWIFT of the Global South, but with African code, African servers, and African law. Part 5, the shockwaves, panic in Western capitals. The news of Operation Golden Gate has reportedly caused panic in Washington and Brussels. A leaked U.S. Treasury memo seen by CBN warns that the Afrogold mandate could undermine the dollar's role as the global reserve currency and trigger commodity price volatility that destabilizes Western economies. European energy companies are reportedly lobbying their governments for exemptions, warning that they will struggle to source African oil and gas if they are forced to use Afrogold. Meanwhile, Western central banks are scrambling to assess how much gold backing the new currency actually has, and whether they will need to stockpile Afrogold reserves to maintain access to African resources. Some analysts are calling it the most significant act of economic defiance since the creation of OPEC. Part 6, Global South Reaction, a new economic order. While the West panics, the Global South is celebrating. BRICS countries, especially China and India, have welcomed the decision, calling it a necessary correction to centuries of monetary imbalance. Russia has already announced plans to denominate its uranium and fertilizer trade with Africa in Afrogold starting next year. Even smaller nations in Latin America and Southeast Asia are exploring the possibility of linking their commodity contracts to Afrogold, creating what some economists are calling a gold-backed trade bloc. The strategic significance is clear. If Africa, home to over 60% of the world's critical minerals, stops accepting dollars, the entire structure of global trade begins to tilt away from Western control. Part 7, Comedy and Irony. When the ATM says bring gold. Let's pause for a moment of comedy, because the irony here is delicious. For decades, Western governments told African leaders to accept their currency, backed by nothing, in exchange for Africa's gold, oil, and copper. Now Africa is saying, if you want the gold, bring the gold. Western CEOs who once dismissed Afrogold as a fantasy are now frantically calling their analysts, asking how to buy it in bulk. The same media outlets that mocked Africa's financial independence as a pipe dream are now running headlines about Afrogold risk exposure. It's poetic justice, the ATM finally asking for a deposit before it spits out anything. Part 8, the ripple effect. Global trade under pressure. The Afrogold mandate is already creating shockwaves far beyond Africa's borders. Commodity exchanges in London and Chicago are reporting extreme volatility, with prices for cobalt, lithium, and gold swinging wildly as traders scramble to adjust to the new settlement system. Shipping companies are demanding contracts be renegotiated. Energy firms are exploring hedging strategies in Afrogold futures. Even semiconductor manufacturers in Asia, desperate for steady supplies of African rare earth minerals, are lobbying their governments to set up Afrogold reserves so their supply chains don't collapse. This is no longer just about Africa. It's about the global economy being forced to operate on Africa's terms for the first time in modern history. And the timing couldn't be more strategic. With electric vehicles, green tech, and AI hardware all depending on African resources, the continent has chosen the perfect moment to demand a new deal. Part 9, Washington's retaliation, threats, sanctions, and panic. Predictably, the United States is not taking this quietly. A leaked memo from the National Security Council warns that the Afrogold policy poses a direct challenge to U.S. monetary leadership and national interests. The The document outlines possible countermeasures, including targeted sanctions against AU officials, trade restrictions on African exports, and even efforts to undermine Afrogold through currency speculation. But insiders say the AU expected this and is prepared. Under a new strategic framework called SHIELD Protocol, the AU Central Bank is coordinating with BRICS partners to create liquidity support lines that would stabilize Afrogold if Washington attempts a speculative attack. China and Russia have already agreed to maintain minimum Afrogold reserves and conduct resource purchases exclusively in Afrogold starting in 2026. India is in advanced negotiations to follow suit. Even Gulf states, long aligned with Washington, are quietly exploring bilateral agreements with African exporters to lock in Afrogold trade channels. The message is clear. Sanctioning Africa now could backfire spectacularly by accelerating the very de-dollarization Washington fears most. Part 10, Europe's Dilemma. Dependence meets defiance. Europe faces an even more complicated situation. The continent imports over 40% of its uranium and 30% of its cobalt from Africa. Much of its green transition plan, from battery production to renewable infrastructure, depends on African resources. EU officials are now caught between two bad choices: comply with the Afrogold mandate and risk weakening the euro's influence, or resist and face potential shortages that could derail Europe's climate and energy goals. One leaked EU briefing warned that a refusal to adopt Afrogold could lead to supply chain collapse in key industries within 18 months. Yet some European diplomats are reportedly urging a middle ground, negotiating temporary waivers while preparing their own gold-backed payment instruments to compete. But African insiders laugh at the idea of waivers. As one AU economic strategist put it during a closed-door session, if they could print gold, they would. But they can't. That's the point. Part 11, BRICS Africa, a new economic superbloc. The Afrogold mandate is also turbocharging geopolitical alliances. The AU's Economic Council has begun formal talks with BRICS about creating a joint settlement network that links Afrogold with the planned BRICS digital currency. The goal, build a parallel trade architecture independent of the dollar and euro, one capable of handling trillions in commodity trade annually. This integration would give the Global South unprecedented leverage. Together, BRICS and the AU represent over 55% of global population, 35% of global GDP, and control more than 70% of known mineral reserves. If their trade system becomes the new norm, Western currencies could see their influence decline rapidly, maybe even irreversibly. Part 12, On the Ground, Africa's new economic pride. On the streets of Accra, Lagos, Nairobi, and Johannesburg, the mood is triumphant. Newspapers hail the policy as a second independence. Economists call it the Berlin Conference, a reference to the 1884 meeting where European powers carved up Africa's resources without African consent. This time, Africa is carving up the terms, and it's doing so not with protest or war, but with contracts, payment systems, and a gold-backed currency no one can ignore. The symbolism is powerful. The same continent that once had its resources priced in foreign currencies is now setting the price. The same nations that once had to beg for access to global markets are now deciding who gets access to theirs. Part 13, Comedy Corner. When the dollar needs a visa. Let's lighten it up for a moment, because history has a sense of humor. For decades, Western leaders lectured Africa about the free market. Now the free market wants Afrogold before it gives you cobalt. The dollar, once the passport to everything, now needs a visa to enter African trade zones. Wall Street traders are panicking like tourists who forgot their travel documents. And financial analysts who mocked Afrogold as fantasy money are suddenly treating it like the holy grail of global finance. It's poetic, it's ironic, and it's hilarious. Part 14, The Grand Strategy. Africa's century Operation Golden Gate isn't just about money, it's about destiny. It's the centerpiece of a broader continental strategy to reclaim Africa's power in the global order. Afrogold is to trade what Afronet is to technology, what Afrovisa is to mobility, and what the One Africa Supreme Court is to justice. Together, they form the architecture of a new Africa, one that no longer begs for inclusion, but commands respect. A continent that no longer trades its wealth for paper, but demands real value in return. a people who no longer accept terms dictated by others, but write their own. The world is waking up to a reality it never expected. Africa is no longer a resource supplier. It's a rule maker. Hash Part 15, final word. Tisu Vanu Bacho, Supreme Family. This isn't just an economic policy. It's a declaration of sovereignty. The Afro Gold mandate is Africa saying enough is enough. No more exporting wealth for paper promises. No more watching trillions leave the continent while our people struggle. No more waiting for permission to control what is ours. The world is changing, and this time, Africa is not being dragged along. It's driving the change, and anyone who wants a piece of Africa's future will now have to pay for it in Africa's terms. Tisu Vanhu Vacho. Smash that like button, share this everywhere, and subscribe.
All right, you heard it. So we're going to move on and not paying attention to SABN. They're going to shift the focus to what white women are saying about their so-called men, which is nothing but a bunch of boys. Now, the last show that I did, I was telling you guys that white boys are fags in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, but in particular the Republican Party. You have what's that boy name? Benny something, and a lot of other people who are going to the fag party. And you think Diddy was bad? I'm here to tell you, white folks are fucked up. They are sexualized a flower. They are criminal minded. They are highly immoral. They don't give a fuck about themselves, about others, about animals, about anything about that is natural. They're not at peace with themselves and not at peace with the world. They have always been like this and will always be like this. Fuck them. We killed them and got them out of Egypt. We killed them and got them out of Greece and Rome. Now it's necessary to kill them again. Politically, economically, spiritually, and physically. This is it. 3 strikes, you're out, motherfucker. You don't get no more chances. The world is sick and tired of you motherfuckers. Hell, white folks are sick and tired of you motherfuckers. But they know they're living a life of lies and deceit, which is the second title of my book, or the undertitle of my book called The White Man's Burden of Lies and Deceit. They admit that they are delusional. And they're tired. I'll be right back.
I've made it clear that no more DEI will be involved with the military. No woke agenda. That means, beard shaving is mandatory, even though it hurts Black soldiers. And if women can't pass the physical tests, tough, because the only skills used in the military are physical feats of strength. And, listening to him talk and contextualizing it with the fact that he goes to a church run by this idiot, and all of these mediocre white men and all of these Christian nationals are throwing a fit about anyone in America who's not a Christian, white, straight man. And they want to take away my rights even more. Your rights, women. They want us to not be able to vote. They want us to be stuck in houses with abusive men. They want us to not be able to get mortgages, credit cards. And when he was talking, I just got so mad, like a visceral response. And to Doug Wilson and the Christian Nationals and misogynists like Charlie Kirk, to all of them I say, fuck you. It is not my fault that you are mediocre. It is not my fault that you are not succeeding in this society. If you want to get a dartboard and start placing blame, I suggest you print out a picture of Ronald Reagan, because he is to blame. He is the one who actively fought against an educated proletariat. He is the one that crippled the labor movement. He is the one who heard the obscure theory and said, oh, yeah, if we don't tax the rich, then all of their wealth that we don't take from them will trickle down, and that will take care of society. We don't need to tax the rich. It'll work that way. And 50 years later, the biggest transfer of wealth has happened, and all of it has gone to them, and none of it to us. You can't get good education, you can't get a good wage, you can't afford anything. They keep blocking healthcare. They keep making sure that we're relying on fossil fuels instead of moving forward with the rest of the world and trying to protect the world. And you vote for them because the people with those policies are the ones that you vote for. Mediocre white men who hate anybody who is not a mediocre white man. And it's just ridiculous. You know, a lot of things aren't set up for you. School isn't set up for you. Making little boys in starting kindergarten and sit in rows and be quiet, there's no worse way to learn. It is set up for us. It's natural that we excel. But you see, the thing is that because y'all have all of this privilege, because you are the most powerful demographic in the world, theoretically, white American men, the fact that you still aren't succeeding makes you feel bad about yourself. Rightly so. You should. And Charlie Kirk saying that, if he saw a black pilot, he'd wonder if he was qualified was just really stupid. Because looking around, all I see is a bunch of white men who are not qualified for where they are. I know that a black person in any position worked 50 times harder than a white one. The same. Black women are surpassing all of us because they've never got to just rest on what color their skin was when they came out of their mother's vagina. What a stupid thing to be proud of, especially if you actually understand that race is a construct. Race is a social construct. And I know you guys have real issues with that because you don't understand the genders one as well. But see, with race, you take our blood, you look at it under a microscope, you can't tell what race anybody is. You might be able to tell genetically where their common ancestors were, but there's no black marker. There's no Chinese marker because it's a construct, which means it's impossible for any of us to be superior to another. There's dumb white people. There's smart white people. The smart white people succeed. See, that's the thing with me. I was raised by a father who told me I can do anything, and I'm married to a husband who tells me that he can do anything. I'm not an idiot. I can babysit my own kids. Go out, have fun. See, I have been surrounded by exceptional white men, and so it's really hard for me to understand what's happening in this country until I think about it a little bit more and realize how terrifying it must be to be a mediocre white man and to see all of the white supremacy that our ancestors fought so hard for, to see it start crumbling. DEI taking away that strength that allowed you to suck and still get jobs. And yeah, they're bringing it back for you. Clearly, look at the idiots running everything. It's not merit-based. We know it isn't. It's just white sycophants. That's it. You gotta be white and you have to kiss Trump's ass. So while y'all are filleting him, we will continue to spread the truth and organize against you. Because I'm not going back to what my grandmother fought against. I'm not letting that happen to my daughter. I'm not letting it happen to my sons. We we are moving towards a good and better America. And right now it's just this little blip where you pathetic pawn scums of humanity are rearing your ugly heads and screaming. And it's fine. We thought y'all were gone. We're just dormant. But now we know. We know now. And so that's just going to change our tactics.
Well, I can tell you, if I can take a minute, that the truth always comes out in the end. They've always been hating on us since the beginning. Now, I don't remember the name of the book. It's been so long ago that I read it. That these pale skins were jealous of us. They would dress up in the finest of silk and trying to act like us. It goes back a ways. So, the next video said, panic, one African Navy just blocked all U.S. warships from entering Indian Ocean. Now, I thought the white man was the most dangerous man on the, and he is, most fearsome man on the planet. He copped out? Of course. They have no choice, man. We're the one who taught them how to fight. I'll be right back.
Panic. One African Navy just blocked all U.S. warships from entering Indian Ocean. By Takunda Mabika, Supreme Africa Breaking News. Tisu Banhuvacho. Supreme family, buckle up because today's intel is not just a headline, it's a seismic shift in global power. According to a classified incident report leaked from the One Africa Naval Command, the African continent has just done the unthinkable. It has denied access to U.S. warships attempting to enter the Indian Ocean, forcing the world's most powerful navy to change course. The operation, codenamed Operation Sealock, is described in internal AU documents as the first full-scale enforcement of African maritime sovereignty in modern history. Sources inside the AU Maritime Security Council say this was not a drill, not an exercise, and not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate show of power, and Washington is furious. Part 1.
How to chat with senior
Hold on.
women online. Join this platform with 40+ users online. Discover
The incident. Operation Sealock activated. The incident began 3 weeks ago when 4 U.S. naval vessels from the Fifth Fleet departed from Bahrain, reportedly for a freedom of navigation exercise in waters near the Mozambique Channel, one of Africa's most strategic maritime choke points. But according to the leaked report, African satellite surveillance systems flagged the group's route early, and intelligence analysts concluded the ships were headed toward a zone now designated as part of the Afro-Gold Maritime Security Corridor, a region declared under AU control last year. The One African Navy's Eastern Fleet, headquartered in Mombasa and supported by bases in Madagascar and Mozambique, was immediately placed on high alert. Within 24 hours, a flotilla of 8 African naval vessels, including 2 Element X-powered stealth destroyers, intercepted the U.S. ships as they approached the corridor.
Now, he just mentioned Element X. Go back and look at my previous videos, and it'll tell you what Element X is. This shit is beyond belief.
Was a tense 17-hour standoff. The U.S. commanders demanded free passage. The African commanders refused. And for the first time in history, the U.S. Navy backed down, rerouting its ships eastward into international waters. One African admiral, speaking under condition of anonymity, described the moment like this. For 200 years, they've sailed past Africa without asking. This time, we told them, you want to pass here, you follow our rules. Part 2. Why it happened. Afro-Gold protection zones. At first glance, this might look like a simple maritime standoff, but it's much deeper than that. The denied passage is directly tied to the rollout of the Afro-Gold security program, a network of trade routes, resource pipelines, and undersea data cables that form the backbone of Africa's new economic infrastructure. The Mozambique Channel, stretching between Madagascar and mainland Africa, is one of the most strategically important shipping lanes in the world. Nearly 30% of Africa's resource exports, including cobalt, oil, and lithium, pass through it. The AU has declared this zone a strategic continental artery and placed it under the protection of the One Africa Navy. Intelligence sources say the U.S. ships were likely conducting electronic surveillance of Afrogold shipment routes and Afronet undersea cables, something African officials view as a direct threat to their security. The new Continental Maritime Sovereignty Act, passed quietly by the AU Parliament last year, gives African forces the legal authority to deny access to any foreign military vessel near these sensitive zones. Hakshep Part 3, a legal gray zone. But Africa doesn't care. Under international maritime law, most of the Indian Ocean is considered international waters. However, coastal states can extend their exclusive economic zones, EEZ, up to 200 nautical miles from shore, giving them special rights to regulate activity in those areas. The AU's legal argument is that because the Afrogold corridor connects multiple EEZs and involves joint continental infrastructure, it qualifies as a protected multi-state strategic zone. Western legal scholars have already called this interpretation controversial, but Africa is not waiting for permission. As one insider at the AU Legal Directorate put it, for centuries, the West created rules that suited its power. We're simply doing the same. Part 4. Washington's Panic, a superpower denied. The reaction in Washington has been described by insiders as alarm bordering on outrage. The Pentagon's classified after-action report, leaked to SABN by a source in the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, states that the denial of access represents a significant and unprecedented constraint on U.S. naval mobility in the Western Indian Ocean. For decades, the U.S. Navy has operated freely in these waters, projecting power from the Gulf of Aden to the Mozambique Channel. The fact that an African naval force, once dismissed as too small and disorganized to matter, successfully denied passage without a shot fired, is sending shockwaves through the Pentagon. The U.S. State Department has lodged a formal diplomatic protest with the African Union, warning that the move sets a dangerous precedent. But behind closed doors, officials are scrambling to reassess U.S. naval strategy for the entire Indian Ocean region. Part 5. The military shift. One African Navy's rise. How did Africa get here? Just 5 years ago, most African navies were underfunded, under-equipped, and operating independently. But under the One Africa Defense Integration Plan, that has changed dramatically. Today, the One Africa Navy operates over 120 vessels, including advanced destroyers, surveillance frigates, and stealth submarines, many co-developed with Chinese and Russian technology partners. The AfroSky Maritime Satellite Network provides real-time tracking of every vessel within 500 nautical miles of the African coastline.
Now, what's so significant about BRICS is that it's a community of countries in the global south. Of course, they're going to be sharing innovation with each other to strengthen that base and to kick the shit out of white folks.
And elite units like Shadow Fleet Zulu conduct continuous surveillance of foreign military activity in African waters. This isn't the old Africa. This is a continent with coordinated naval doctrine, satellite intelligence, and political will, a combination that even superpowers now have to respect. Hashahir Part 6, BRICS backing. Africa is not alone. Another reason Africa is acting so boldly. It's not standing alone. According to leaked diplomatic cables, Russia, China, and India were all briefed on Operation Sealock weeks before the U.S. vessels were intercepted. Satellite reconnaissance support was reportedly provided by China's Gaofen 12 surveillance system, while Russian naval advisors were embedded with the Eastern Fleet's command staff during the operation. India, which relies heavily on the Mozambique Channel for energy shipments, has quietly supported Africa's increased control over the corridor, viewing it as a counterweight to U.S. dominance in the Indo-Pacific. Together, these partnerships give the One Africa Navy strategic depth and diplomatic cover, making it far riskier for Washington to retaliate.
Still thinking about upgrading your summer footwear? Today's your chance. The Florida flip-flops are crafted for men.
Part 7, NATO's emergency meeting. The rules have changed. The incident has triggered a diplomatic earthquake in the West. Within 48 hours of the standoff, NATO convened an emergency maritime security summit in Brussels, with US, British, and French officials flying in on short notice. According to leaked meeting notes obtained by CIBN, the alliance's assessment was blunt. Africa's decision to deny passage signals a fundamental shift in global naval dynamics. For decades, NATO navies have operated under a principle known as freedom of navigation, a doctrine that gives them virtually unlimited access to global seas under the guise of protecting trade. But the memo concludes that the One Africa Naval Doctrine is rewriting that playbook. By declaring Afro-Gold security zones off limits, Africa has turned once open waters into sovereign maritime corridors, where foreign militaries must now ask permission. A senior NATO admiral reportedly warned colleagues that the precedent could spread. If Africa can deny US warships, what's to stop Latin America or Southeast Asia from doing the same? For the first time, Western strategists are facing a world where their navies can no longer sail wherever they please, and it terrifies them. Part 8. U.S. Retaliation Plans. The Containment Strategy. Inside Washington, the mood is darker. Pentagon sources say the Department of Defense is now drafting a containment strategy aimed at countering Africa's growing maritime power. Among the measures under consideration, expanding the U.S. naval presence in the Red Sea and Arabian Sea to flank African waters, increasing funding for U.S. drone and satellite surveillance of Afro-Gold corridors, lobbying allied nations to refuse African port access to One Africa Navy vessels. But insiders admit these measures are largely symbolic. The simple truth is that the U.S. Navy cannot afford a direct confrontation without risking escalation. And with Africa backed by BRICS partners, any escalation could spiral into a global standoff. One senior U.S. defense official privately admitted that naval dominance in the Western Indian Ocean is no longer guaranteed. For a superpower that once viewed the Indian Ocean as its own backyard, that's a stunning admission of decline. Part 9. Global media shock. Headlines of a power shift. The world's media has erupted over the story. European outlets described the event as the Suez Crisis of the 21st century. Chinese state media called it proof that colonial naval supremacy is over. Even U.S. newspapers, usually cautious in tone, admitted that Africa has flexed a kind of power once unimaginable. Markets reacted too. Defense stocks dipped amid fears of a strategic realignment, while African sovereign bonds rallied, a sign that investors now see Africa as an assertive geopolitical actor, not a passive resource supplier. For decades, Africa was a background character in stories of naval power. This week, it became the main character, and the world noticed. Part 10. BRICS support. The new maritime axis. The One Africa Navy's bold move is strengthening ties with its BRICS partners. Russian naval officials have reportedly offered to participate in future patrols of Afro-Gold maritime zones. China, which already has a naval base in Djibouti, is exploring joint exercises with African fleets. India, whose shipping lanes depend heavily on East African waters, is pushing for a new BRICS Maritime Security Pact that would formalize joint defense of key sea routes. This emerging BRICS plus Africa maritime axis could transform the balance of naval power. For the first time since World War II, the Western Alliance would face a coordinated naval bloc with enough geographic control and resource leverage to challenge its dominance. And at the center of that bloc is Africa. Part 11. Africa's new naval doctrine. From defense to deterrence. Insiders say Operation Sealock is just the beginning. The AU's newly approved Continental Naval Doctrine, CND, lays out an ambitious strategy for the next decade. Its three main pillars. 1. Sovereign control. All maritime zones linked to African infrastructure, resource trade, or Afro-Gold logistics will be placed under AU oversight. 2. Strategic deterrence. The One Africa Navy will develop the capability to intercept, delay, or deny any foreign military presence near these zones. 3. Blue water expansion. By 2030, the AU aims to field at least 2 aircraft carriers and deploy fleets capable of extended missions in the Arabian Sea and beyond. What was once a defensive coastal force is transforming into a global naval actor, one that can shape shipping routes, influence trade, and deter even the most powerful navies on Earth. Part 12. Comedy and irony. The superpower who needed permission. Now, Supreme Family, Let's talk about the part that makes this story hilarious. The same US Navy that once sailed into African waters without so much as a courtesy call had to ask for permission and got told no. For centuries, Western powers claimed their ships sailed for freedom. This week, that freedom got stopped at the door by an African fleet with a big new sign, by invitation only. One African analyst joked that the US Navy just learned what it feels like to be a visa applicant. Another quipped that Washington might soon need an Afro-Maritime visa just to pass through the Mozambique Channel. It's funny, but it's also history, because for the first time, the world's most powerful military was treated like everyone else. And
Hold on.
that, Supreme Family, is the definition of equality. 13. The bigger picture. Africa's rise as a maritime superpower. The implications of Operation Sea Lock go far beyond a single standoff. This is about Africa rewriting its place in the global order. Control of the seas has always defined great powers, from the British Empire to the US Navy. And now Africa is claiming its share of that power. With over 30,000 kilometers of coastline and 1,200 commercial ports and critical choke points controlling global trade, Africa's geography alone gives it leverage that rivals any major naval power. Combine that with Afro-gold-driven trade, satellite surveillance, and BRICS-backed naval modernization, and the continent is no longer a spectator in maritime strategy. It's a player. Final word. Tisu Vanhu Bacho Supreme Family. This isn't just a story about ships and seas. It's a story about history reversing course. For centuries, Africa's waters were crossed by foreign navies enforcing someone else's will. Today, those same navies are being told to wait outside. The one African Navy didn't fire a shot. It didn't need to. Its message was louder than any missile. Africa is sovereign, Africa is united, and Africa decides who sails through its waters. Tisu Vanhu Vacho. Smash that like button, share this with the world, and subscribe, because this is just the beginning. The age of African maritime power has arrived, and the world's most powerful fleets are learning to live with it.
All right, you heard it. I mean, if you ain't caught on by now, you're going to get caught on. Because this is it, my people. This is it. There's no turning back. We're not going back. We're taking over every motherfucking thing, including the United States and Europe. This is it. And let me play this one, and I'll be right back.
Feel the tremors. A coalition that began as an experiment among 5 ambitious nations has matured into a formidable force, one that is now redrawing the map of global power, finance, and influence. This is not just another expansion, it's a carefully orchestrated rebalancing of the world order, and it's unfolding under one name, BRICS, the awakening of a new economic superpower. Once, BRICS was little more than a clever acronym. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. 5 emerging players seeking a louder voice in global affairs. But that was yesterday's world. By 2025, this alliance has transformed beyond recognition, evolving from a loose coalition into a global powerhouse, now counting 11 full members, 13 formal partners, and more than 30 nations lined up to join. The turning point came early this year. On January 6, 2025, Indonesia officially entered the bloc, bringing not only its vast population, but also a strategic Southeast Asian presence that expanded BRICS' reach deep into the Pacific. Saudi Arabia, once invited in 2023, remains a wild card, still balancing its century-old ties with Washington against the gravitational pull of the rising BRICS world. The start of 2024 marked another major leap. Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates formally took their seats, injecting vital energy corridors, trade routes, and new capital into the alliance. With their inclusion, BRICS now represents over 45% of global GDP and more than half of the world's population, a staggering reality that even a decade ago seemed impossible. And this is only the beginning. The waiting list is long and revealing. Among the 32 nations expressing interest, 23 have already submitted formal applications. From oil-rich Bahrain and Kuwait to industrial Malaysia, from Turkey and Vietnam to Belarus and Mexico, the roster of hopefuls reads like a blueprint for a new global system. For Gulf states, membership means escaping the dollar's shadow while securing stable markets for their oil exports. For Mexico, it's about leverage, the chance to become BRICS's bridge into Latin America. And for Belarus, it's a geopolitical pivot, a gateway to Eastern Europe that pushes BRICS influence deeper into the heart of the continent. Behind the appeal lies something more powerful than symbolism: money. Since 2016, the BRICS New Development Bank has financed nearly $32 billion across 96 major infrastructure projects, many of them in local currencies. This shift, away from the US dollar, has given developing nations a rare lifeline: the power to borrow and build without surrendering economic control to Western institutions. The 2025 Rio Summit marked the dawn of BRICS' next chapter. The world watched as leaders gathered under Brazil's presidency, not to confront the West, but to chart a new vision for the global South. Brazil championed cooperation over confrontation, emphasizing development, stability, and shared prosperity. But beneath the smiles and speeches, deep fault lines remained. For the first time since 2013, Xi Jinping was absent, officially due to scheduling conflicts, while Vladimir Putin, still under an international arrest warrant, addressed the summit by video. Their absence spoke volumes, but the message of the summit was louder still. BRICS was no longer a sideshow to Western power. It was preparing to lead. Yet within the alliance, a quiet struggle continues. China and Russia favor rapid expansion, pushing to absorb as many nations as possible into their orbit. India and Brazil, more cautious, argue for discipline, insisting that the bloc must grow with purpose, not haste. The outcome of this internal debate will determine whether BRICS becomes a stable new order or fractures under its own ambition. And as BRICS rises, tension with Washington is intensifying. What analysts once called a trade rivalry has now evolved into a full-scale economic confrontation. The United States, under President Donald Trump, has turned its trade guns toward the bloc, one member at a time. Citing unfair practices and sanctions evasion, Washington rolled out new tariffs targeting BRICS economies, beginning with China. Beijing's answer was swift and unflinching. Retaliatory tariffs that soared as high as 145%, before eventually stabilizing around 30%. But instead of retreating, China pivoted. It widened its domestic markets to fellow BRICS partners, weaving an alternative trade network designed to bypass the US altogether. Soon after, India became the next target of Washington's trade offensive, a sign that the old rules of global commerce are breaking down fast. What began as a financial alliance has become something far greater: a geopolitical counterweight capable of rewriting the script of world power. BRICS is no longer an acronym. It's a signal, a new language of influence, cooperation, and defiance. And as this alliance grows, one thing is clear: the era of unipolar dominance is fading, and a multipolar world is rising. One where power flows not through Washington or Brussels, but through Sao Paulo, Moscow, Beijing, New Delhi, and beyond. The shift is already underway. The question now is not if the world will change, but how far BRICS is willing to go to shape it. Once praised by Donald Trump as a trusted ally, India now finds itself at the sharp end of Washington's trade arsenal. What began as a 25% tariff on Indian goods quickly doubled to 50%, sending shockwaves through New Delhi's exporters. Brazil didn't escape the hit either. When Washington imposed similar 50% tariffs, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva urged BRICS nations to stand together, not negotiate separately, and to mount a coordinated economic response. South Africa was next, facing a 30% tariff wall. But this dispute quickly turned political. President Trump accused Pretoria of discriminatory policies against the country's white minority, a claim fiercely denied by South African officials. The fallout deepened when reports surfaced that certain South Africans were granted selective U.S. entry exemptions, further straining already tense diplomatic ties. Russia, already boxed in by earlier sanctions, avoided new trade penalties. But Moscow stepped into a different role, leading BRICS' push for de-dollarization. President Putin framed it as economic self-defense, insulating member economies from U.S. pressure and currency manipulation. At the heart of this movement lies the New Development Bank, NDB, the alliance's financial backbone. Since 2016, it has approved over $32 billion across nearly 100 major infrastructure and energy projects. But what truly sets it apart isn't just the size. It's the currency strategy.
Are you
Hold
actually
on.
using beetroot the right way? As someone who's studied natural remedies for years, I can tell
Loans are increasingly issued in local currencies, sidestepping the US dollar entirely. This gives members like Egypt, Indonesia, and Ethiopia access to long-term financing without the financial instability that dollar-based lending often brings. For developing nations, that's not convenience, it's economic survival. The most recent milestone came when Indonesia officially joined BRICS, as confirmed by Brazil's government on Monday. With Jakarta's entry, the bloc's membership now stands at 10. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Indonesia, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. Each new addition expands the bloc's reach, not only across continents, but across energy markets, trade routes, and political spheres. This isn't just growth, it's a strategic realignment of global power. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres put it bluntly. The current system was built by rich countries for rich countries. Most of Africa didn't even have a seat at the table during Bretton Woods. BRICS in that sense is not merely an alliance. It's a correction, a platform where the developing world finally gets a seat, a say, and a stake in shaping the global agenda. Energy remains the invisible engine driving much of this transformation. Should Saudi Arabia finalize its membership, it would hand BRICS immense leverage, not only through its oil output, but via its influence in OPEC. With Russia already a major energy power and the UAE and Iran inside the tent, BRICS could soon command a significant portion of global energy flows. For Washington, that's a strategic nightmare. If the bloc starts settling more oil trades in non-dollar currencies, one of the key pillars of US global dominance could begin to crumble. But BRICS' real test isn't size, it's unity. The bigger it gets, the harder it becomes to steer. The bloc's members span every continent, with vastly different economies, ideologies, and priorities. Keeping them aligned won't be easy, especially under the pressure of a trade war. Trump's strategy of targeting members one by one could exploit those differences, tempting some to prioritize US market access over bloc loyalty. Yet paradoxically, that same pressure may also tighten the alliance, accelerating efforts to build a parallel economics ecosystem, one capable of surviving without Western systems. What's clear is that BRICS has moved far beyond theory. With its expanding membership, growing financial clout, and dominance over critical resources, it's emerging as a central force in the next phase of the global economy, a direct challenger to the Western-led order. This deepening partnership, especially between Brazil and China, the B and C of BRICS Plus, signals the formation of a counterweight to the G7 itself. The global implications are immense. For developing nations, BRICS offers an alternative path, fairer financing, broader markets, and political autonomy. For the traditional powers, it's a challenge to the very system that has sustained them for decades. As the alliance continues to expand, its choices on membership, trade policy, and currency reform will reverberate across every corner of the global economy. From energy markets to exchange rates, the ripples of BRICS' rise will touch governments, corporations, and citizens alike. So the question now isn't whether BRICS can reshape the world. It's how far it's willing to go to finish the job. The next chapter of this power shift isn't coming someday. It's already underway.
Now let me expand on that from what I can gather. BRICS united had different power points. Obviously, the main one is Africa with all of its resources that the world needs. Cobalt, lithium, gold, platinum, you name it. But each of these pieces that's coming together to form BRICS cannot be denied. The power is overwhelming. The West is going to have to just sit down, shut the fuck up before they get some bitch slapped. That's it. I mean, to make it more about as easy as I can make it, that's it. None of the West products can come into the BRICS hegemony, political, economic, spiritual, and militarily, unless they want it. And if they don't have Afro gold, you can forget it. So here we have a white woman finally admits that their men are the most dangerous men on earth. I'll be right back. 5 minutes long, 4 minutes long.
Off the top, I am not necessarily saying this, but this lady is saying it, and I'm just kind of Talk about what she said. Check it out.
About how ironic it is that the right demonizes people of color when the only time I've feared for my life has been around a white man. I get so many hate comments like these few here. So the time I just write it off as immature, angry men, but the times that I've genuinely been scared that violence was going to be inflicted upon me have been white men. Not to mention that a lot of domestic violence as well as many mass shootings are committed by white men. There are going to be people in any demographic that commit crimes, but the fact that the right focuses so intensely on the single crime that a person of color commits is so dishonest. Some of the craziest things that have happened to me since I started posting is that I've gotten my account banned because white supremacists mass reported me for being underage, which I'm clearly not. They found my phone number and leaked it, so I had to change my phone number. They tried to get me fired by contacting any school in Chicago to see if I worked there. There was even an online page to see who was calling which school. I've literally been called a race traitor and told that I will be lynched along with POC. So no, people of color aren't the problem here. It is white men, and that's why I make the content I do. They prove it to me more and more every single day why it's necessary.
So as you saw there, that was a Caucasian woman who basically said that she feels the most dangerous man is the white man, the man that looks like her. Now, she talked about a lot of things that have happened to her or been said to her from that of men that look like her. She basically said, yeah, they're the most violent. Of course, she gets called all kind of things, and they even said they was going to her for defending, as she says, people of color. And she also mentioned black people. But yeah, I'm just piggybacking. I think that is the consensus, that they are the most violent men and people. I mean, come on, go throughout history. You see men that look like her rummaging through everybody's societies and civilizations and all kind of stuff, doing things that are unkind. They happen. And so my thing is this, and that's they woman, not necessarily like their girlfriend or whatever, but that woman looks like them, and she is telling everybody, don't believe the hype. It be them that be with the stuff. And I learned this a long time ago. Whenever I would date somebody and I'd have a conversation, this has happened a couple times, with their mom or their grandma or something, and they said, oh, child, don't mess with him. He this, that, the other. He ain't no good. And silly old me, I'd be like, oh, okay. And I continue dating them, and then all the things they grandmama or mama said came true. And I'm like, man, I should have listened. So I'm saying that is because, yeah, that's their woman telling us that the white man is the most violent. Of course, we know that. But again, I'm just saying, I ain't necessarily saying it right now. That's her that's saying it. And I think she would know her men better than us. And of course, we don't have to look very far, especially nowadays, to see all the things that they are doing really kind of to each other now. I don't know, maybe they got bored of doing it to everybody else. Nah, of course, they're going to continue to do it to everybody else, but they really kind of turning on each other now. So, and they turned on her. But I thought that they would die, for that white woman and all this other stuff. Of course, y'all seen all the stuff in North Carolina with the white woman who was unfortunately life taken on the bus and all of that. They went stir crazy. And I'm not necessarily saying they shouldn't have gone stir crazy, but is that white woman's life more important than the white woman I just showed y'all who said that they are threatening her because they don't like the things that she is saying, the truth that she is telling about them? Sounds like selective outrage, but yeah, that was her saying that her man that looked like her is the most violent. And I think we kind of already knew that. Anyway, y'all let me know what you think of that. And for more insightful commentary, please subscribe to this channel and my channel, The Demetria K Show, here on YouTube. Peace.
All right, the next one had to deal with the $37 trillion debt of America, not even counting some $6 trillion of all of Europe. But before I get on to that, I just want to let you guys know that this world is going to change. We're going to have a major depression. You think that the one in 1929 was bad? And if Trump and the Republican Party can pull off the biggest global Ponzi scheme with the stable coins and transferring all of the debt onto the stable coin for the people who want to buy it, it is going to absolutely positively destroy the world, economically speaking. A lot of people are going to commit suicide in the millions, if not 100,000. And this, my people, I think this is going to happen before January 26, 2026, when the U.S. of Africa take its place and become a recognized superpower. I'll be right back. I just want to explain this.
Was born. That's how long it takes to pay America's national debt.
Basically, nothing stops this train. Next 10 years, we're going to be running very large fiscal deficits in the US, almost regardless.
Translation, nothing can save it. Unless the whole world decides to chip in $37 trillion. Putin's advisor calls it the crypto cloud. I'll show you how it works. The numbers don't just look bad. They are impossible. How impossible are we talking about? If you were to gather all the coins, all the bills from all around the world, they add up to $8.3 trillion, which means the U.S. owns 5 times all the money on Earth. And here's the kicker. Just the interest payments alone have gone vertical. Q2 of 2025, $1.16 trillion a year. That's before even touching the principal. Think about that. America now spends more in interest than it spends on its entire military. More than the GDP of most countries.
How to chat with senior women online. Join this platform with 40 plus users online. Discover a
more than Apple, Microsoft, and Google's profits combined. So the math doesn't work. The debt is not getting repaid. It's only getting rolled, inflated, and exported. Which means if the old playbook is broken, then what's the new one? Here comes stablecoins. Dollars in cryptocurrency rails. And why would anybody want those? Think of normal dollars like cars. Well, cars, like dollars, could get you almost anywhere and anything. But they actually have to follow lanes, stoplights, speed limits, aka the rules of the banking system. It's slow, restrictive, and ultimately, it only works if the roads are actually built. Stablecoins are like strapping a helicopter rotor onto those cars. Same car, same driver, still the dollar. But now it can lift off, skip all the traffic, and fly from point A to point B. Technically, there is air traffic controllers who can ground you if they want. But in practice, it's way more open and mobile than being stuck on the road. July 2025, Congress passes the Genius Act.
The Genius Act is a watershed moment in how we approach digital finance while also preserving the institutions that have served our nation for decades. Digital assets are the future, and it is our responsibility to ensure the United States continues to lead the way.
Which says stablecoins like USDC and USDT must be backed one-to-one with US Treasuries or cash. It sounds boring, right? Here's the trick. Every new stablecoin minted is a direct demand to US Treasuries, aka America's debt, in a certificate form. The more the world wants digital dollars, the more US Treasuries. And therefore, the more debt America gets to sell. The result? America pushes its debt onto global stablecoin holders. Inflation turns from a hidden tax at home onto a shared cost abroad. The reset button isn't paying the debt.
This time is different.
It's spreading it one stablecoin at a time. And this isn't theory. Tether's CEO told me that himself.
We are using the money to buy back the US Treasuries, the US debt. In 2024, we were the 5th largest purchaser in US Treasuries. Today, we hold more than $125 billion in US Treasuries.
And the rest of the world, they're calling BS. At the Eastern Economic Forum, Putin's advisor, Anton Kovyakov accused the U.S. of shoving its $37 trillion debt into a crypto cloud, then devalue it at the world's expense. Sounds crazy? Not really. We've seen this movie before. Parallels to U.S. past rug pull. 1933, FDR revalued gold and wiped savers overnight. 1971, Nixon killed the gold standard and broke the Bretton Woods Agreement. So the real question isn't if the U.S. is going to rug pull again. The matter is when. But the thing is, it's already too late. Stablecoins are spreading faster than wildfire in Argentina, Venezuela, Nigeria, Brazil. Upwards of 9% of the population are using stablecoins every single week. And that's on top of stablecoin adoption growing globally 53% per year. Because their own money is already worthless. So they'd rather hold a new ticking time bomb than one that already exploded.
With USD, you have 420 million users, and each one of them holds a portion of US treasuries. So we decentralize the US debt in a way that the US is much less subject to geopolitical attacks by one single decision maker that might decide that US is not its best ally.
Translation: the US just found a way to quietly push its debt onto the entire world, and the world knows it. Imagine the world only has $100 and I were to borrow all of it. Paying it back the hard way hurts, but if I print another $100 bill, the prices rise and my old debt gets easier to pay. That's inflation. It looks like I repaid, but in reality, I cheated. Now, at stablecoins. You mint Tether. The issuer buys a U.S. Treasury bill. $1 in, $1 out. The result? A growing ocean of digital dollars backed by U.S. debt, living on phones from Buenos Aires to Laos. So when dilution happens, the pain is shared globally. That's the trick. And here's the crazy part. This isn't just theory. People are already using Bitcoin and stablecoins together in the real world. Take Ledn, for example. They let you borrow dollar stablecoins while using your Bitcoin as collateral. That means you don't have to sell your Bitcoin. You get to keep your upsides while still getting liquidity in dollars when you need it. It's like the collision of both systems. Bitcoin as the hard collateral, stablecoins as the flexible cash. If you want to check it out, I'll leave the link below. Now ask yourself, if stablecoins are digitalized dollars, why are the issuers buying Bitcoin? Stablecoins were supposed to shore up the dollar, but they also normalize something bigger. The idea that money doesn't have to live in banks. Once billions of people get used to the idea of digital dollars on their phone, the leap to a money that can't be printed, frozen, or even rugged for is not that far. How ironic. The same tool built to save the dollar could be the one to accelerate its replacement. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is already moving. China and Russia are already hoarding gold. BRICS is already setting up trade systems outside of the dollar. Countries burned by US sanctions are desperate to find any escape hatch. So here's the clash. America pawns its $37 trillion problem into the crypto cloud, shifting the cost to hundreds of fragile economies. The rest of the world doubles down on gold, BRICS, and any other alternative. And hovering in the middle is Bitcoin. Neutral, borderless, and incorruptible. So which future wins? America's digital dollar crypto cloud, a BRICS-led gold block, or a money with no master at all? You tell me.
Wow. If you don't get that, I don't know what to tell you.
¿Alguna vez has imaginado tener una caligrafía tan bonita que todos?
But we're in a very, very tough spot. And it's going to get rougher. Because if America sneezes, the world catches HIV, gonorrhea, you name it, and pneumonia. I don't know what to tell you, but it's going to be, a lot of people are going to be hurt, globally speaking, thinking that they're getting something of value in the stable coin. They're not getting shit, they're getting shifted. And the white boys in the middle of that shit, and once again, fucking up. I'll be right back.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So for so long we have lived in a world where only one group of people control the narrative for everybody, and their voice was the only voice being heard in many cases. As a matter of fact, they pride themselves on being the police of the world, and they even believe themselves to be the moral authority in the world, despite the fact that they've gone from continent to continent and have wreaked havoc among many different populations. So anyway, people around the world are shutting it down. They are shutting down these voices of entitlement and privilege, and they're telling them, look, you can no longer control the narrative. We're not trying to hear anything you got to say, especially if you're trying to warn us about somebody else. You're trying to pretend as though you're protecting us, specifically talking about Africa. They're like, no, we don't need to hear anything. Shh, shh, shh. Be quiet. Anyway, listen at these voices as these people lay it all out and they shut it down. They're like, look, your narrative doesn't matter anymore. You can't even speak from a position of being fair or a position of fairness. So we don't want to hear anything you got to say anymore. Take a listen at these voices, and of course, I will be right back.
I am also quite offended. It just shows that white people have so much privilege.
We're all the same, right?
Please don't disturb us, you're speaking. Thank you. I'm sorry, but my voice is not land. You can't colonize it. It's true. So for me, white people have so much privilege to be able to avoid talking about topics like this. Because you said racism is a difficult conversation for you to have. Black people do not have the privilege of avoiding the conversation because they live in those conditions. Their entire beings are tied to that, and they somehow have to make it out of the townships. They have to make it big for their family. And then added on top of that is the guilt that so many successful Black people feel because they don't believe they deserve that success, while the rest of their family is at home, still under this big boot of the white man. So no, please don't tell me that white people do not owe us an apology, because they do. And they have never given us that apology.
I'm been very concerned lately about China and sort of they are now all over Africa, buying things and investing over there and getting those countries dependent on them and supporting, non-democratic people. And I'm just
like whom?
Well,
we are in a country that supports Saudi Arabia.
Yes, that's true. Right.
So suddenly we have a problem with, superpowers supporting non-democratic people. And let me explain why you shouldn't worry about it. But please continue.
Well, I mean, they're in Africa. They're lending money to countries to build ports and different infrastructure.
To build what?
Port.
And harbors. What's wrong with that?
And because
countries that need ports get ports.
But they're making people dependent on. I mean, I know it's the same thing that we've done, which is
no, it's not
around the world.
They are far more humanistic than the United States ever was.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. So
let me give you an example. Of course, they are peddling for influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they are non-interventionist. Absolutely non-interventionist in a way that Europeans, the West, has never managed to fathom.
But I have a feeling they have a longer term thought process that is more interventionist.
Right. But anyway, let's judge what we see. Let's judge what. Okay. Wait, let's start at the beginning. The Chinese never asked Apple to go to Shenzhen and produce all the iPhones. It was Steve Jobs that decided that. Yeah? Mm-hmm. It was not China that went to Washington, D.C. and demanded that they buy a third of your national debt. If they hadn't bought it, you would be in serious trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 3. I did allude to this in my talk. If in 2008 China had not cranked up their credit bubble, you would be in a new Great Depression now. So, China, the United States, and the European Union are absolutely synergistic, and they need one another in a way that if we fail to acknowledge and to nurture, billions of people, including the majority of the people in this country, are going to suffer. When it comes to the influence of China outside its borders, I have to say, firstly, it's quite remarkable that they don't seem to have any military ambitions. Secondly, Africa. I'll give you an example, a specific example. Ethiopia. 2004, because I happened to be there and I have some first-hand experience of it. They went into Ethiopia. I'll tell you why they went into Ethiopia, because they suspected there was oil. Because China is a major industrial power, but it lacks primary resources. Now, instead of going into Africa with troops, colonially, destroying the country, killing people like the West has done for the last 100 years, what they did was they went to Addis Ababa and they said to the government, we would like, and we can see you have problems with your infrastructure, we would like to build some new airports, upgrade your railway system, create a telephone system, and rebuild your roads. And we'll do this all for free. No strings attached. We don't want anything from you. And they did. Why did they do it? Because it's soft power. Because because they knew that if oil is discovered, and it was discovered later, then, of course, the Ethiopian government will be much more open to Chinese oil companies coming there. They have never combined their investment with imperialistic.
I am yet to find a history book about Europeans that can be trusted. I am yet to find a history book where Europeans have not come into Africa and taken from Africa, dispossessed and harmed Africans. I'm yet to find this book, so I'm going to need you to kindly point me to the book that I need to read, where it is that Africans could trust Europeans and they kept their word. That's all I need. We are yet to meet the Europeans that we can trust, that has actually kept their word and has delivered on that promise. We are still working towards structures, we are still working towards relationship building and nation building in order for us to get to the point where you can say that this is hate, because what he says is true. So until then, nah.
Did you know that you can call your soulmate into your life right now? Here's how. This is the soulmate sketch I...
Give those folks a round of applause. Give them a round of applause. See, a lot of people are tired of the sense of entitlement and privilege that people like to just throw up in your faces all the time. So now people around the world, they're saying, look, we don't need your input. We don't need your opinion. We need you to be quiet. We don't need you to teach us anything about history that we don't already know, because your version of history don't even line up with reality. Everywhere they have gone, like the young lady at the last part said, they have betrayed everyone they've ever dealt with.
That's
so
right.
At this point, to try to talk about trust and anything like that, that should never be a conversation that you have unless you're telling people you can't be trusted. Because what you've done around this world for a very long time is you've wreaked havoc. The people are tired. It's very hypocritical for the West to try to say anything to anybody about their dealings with Africa. Now, I'm not going to sit here and champion China at all. They did make some very valid points about China, but I don't trust any of them, to be honest with you. But when you have a nation or nations, Western European nations, who have historically carved up Africa, taken all the resources, displaced the people, mistreated the people, pretty much ignored the people in terms of their voice in anything dealing with their own lands or their own regions, disrespected the people, deprived the people, all the things that the West has done, uprooted, stripped of resources, exploited every negative word you can imagine they have done to the people of Africa. Now, for them to now try to step up and say, oh, you better look out for China. Oh, be careful of dealing with India. Oh, watch out for this one. Watch out for that one. It's like, how dare you throw your voice into it at all? How dare you throw your voice into it when you have done nothing but lie, steal, kill, and destroy? That's all you've done.
Yes,
There has not been one place that you have gone and established peace.
Never.
Now, that's coming from a quote from Malcolm X. He says, name me one place that you have gone and established peace. Not even among your own people have you established peace. Now, this is not anyone being mean. We're just stating the facts. That is a fact. And so don't have that shocked look on your face when people are starting to tell you you no longer control the narrative. Like the one young lady said, you are, my voice is not land. You can't colonize that. You can't tell me what to say, or you can't straighten out my opinion of you. You can't control that narrative. And so even when the one woman tried to stand up and speak her piece, the man, he looks like he's white, but he sounds like he's from the Middle East or another region of the world. He said, look, what you're saying is not even true. You got this stuff all wrong. You believe what they told you, but the fact is, this is what actually happened. This is reality right here. So to see all of these people shutting it down and telling these people, look, shh, shh, you haven't established peace anywhere. You haven't been fair. You haven't kept your word. You've been a scoundrel everywhere you've gone. So we are cutting your voice out of the conversation. We don't need your opinions on anything. As a matter of fact, we are coming together, many nations. We are coming together like a brick, forming the BRICS nations, and we are going to break you into pieces.
Yes,
and
sir.
then even have a goal set in mind. Even if it doesn't happen this year like the original goal, that's not to say that it's not going to happen sometime soon. That being said, the reality of the situation is coming to pass, and is coming to pass fast. People are no longer respecting their voices. They don't even want to hear their voices. As a matter of fact, many are starting to silence their voices because they have lied for far too long. They have manipulated for far too long. They have destroyed for far too long. And people are tired of it. I mean, even the young folk, that young woman said, shh, she told, don't even try it. Don't even try it. I'm speaking now. And see, that makes them uncomfortable. It makes them very uncomfortable when other people who they're used to dominating no longer respects them, no longer wants to hear their opinions, no longer wants to even give them the floor to speak their piece. It's like you've spoken enough. Your actions have spoken louder than any words than you can say. So we are starting to see it all unravel. This was prophesied. The Bible told us very clearly concerning Esau that the pride of your heart has deceived you. The pride of your heart has deceived you. You thought this thing was going to go on forever and ever and ever, but not so. Anyway, I'm done with this. Until next time, I'm out.
I think we know what the deal is, and I think we know in what direction this is going and how this is going and what that means. So, hold on. So, it's just automatic. You know how you just get sick and tired of your kids hooping and hollering, and you just gotta say, shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? These people are kids, man. They come from the black woman, but god damn, we got that belt out now. And Mama Africa is woke now, and she sees all the bullshit that her kid been doing. Enough is enough. Payback's a bitch. And the sins of the father and mother are always visited upon their children forever and ever. Amen. And I'm here to tell you, when black folks say, I bet, we're not just folding up the chairs and sitting down and letting you do what you want to do. We're recording everything that's been done, everything that's been said. And when the time is here, we're going to beat the fuck out of you. Because when we have not forgotten, and we're going to take our vengeance on your ass. And this is where the next video comes in. G7 banks beg Africa to access Afro gold. New currency dominate global trade. That's it. The dollar supremacy is no more. Every global currency is going to be backed by the global reserve currency, which is the Afro gold. I'll be right back.
Panic. G7 banks beg Africa for access to Afrogold. New currency dominates global trade. By Takunda Mabika. Supreme Africa breaking news. Tisu Vanhuvacho. Supreme family. If you thought Afrogold was just a symbolic dream, think again. The world's biggest banks are now scrambling, sweating, and straight up begging for access to a currency they once mocked. Smash that like button, share this video everywhere, and subscribe, because today's leak shows that the power of money itself has officially shifted to Africa. Part 1. How a currency they ignored became a threat. For decades, global finance has revolved around the same two pillars, the US dollar and the euro. These two currencies, backed by Western central banks and enforced through trade rules, dominated everything from oil purchases to foreign reserves. But behind the scenes, Africa was building a weapon the world didn't see coming, Afrogold. Afrogold isn't a cryptocurrency, a digital token, or a political slogan. It's a gold-backed continental trade currency created under a secret African Union program known internally as Project Sankofa. Instead of printing money out of thin air, Afrogold is directly tied to the real gold reserves of over 40 African states, from South Africa's deep mines to Mali's historic deposits and Sudan's untapped reserves. This means every Afrogold unit represents actual physical wealth. And as global inflation, banking scandals, and currency manipulation erode trust in Western money, Afrogold has become a beacon of stability. Part 2. The moment everything changed. At first, Afrogold's impact was small. It was quietly used to settle a few bilateral trade deals between African nations. Then BRICS partners started experimenting with Afrogold in energy and raw material contracts. But the real game changer came earlier this year, when the African Union announced that all future continental oil, gold, and strategic mineral exports would be priced and settled in Afrogold. That single announcement triggered a chain reaction. China began paying for African lithium in Afrogold. India switched half its cocoa imports to Afrogold settlement. Gulf states started negotiating oil refinery deals in Afrogold. And African exporters, fed up with fluctuating dollar rates and foreign banking fees, began rejecting payment in anything else. Within months, Afrogold accounted for 34% of all African trade settlements.
There it is.
And that's when panic hit Western banks. Part 3. The leaked memo that changed everything, according to a classified AU Central Bank report obtained by SABN, major G7 financial institutions, including JP Morgan Chase, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Crédit Agricole, and Barclays, have all submitted formal requests to join the Afrogold settlement system. The leaked memo, marked strictly confidential Central Financial Secretariat, shows that these banks are seeking Afrogold clearing accounts so their corporate clients can pay African suppliers. Afrogold reserve access to back investment funds. Membership in the Afrogold Interbank Payment Network, AIPN, the system that clears transactions continent-wide. One paragraph reads bluntly, failure to secure AfroGold access will result in significant market share losses across African commodity sectors within 24 months. Translation? The banks that once dictated the terms of global finance are now terrified of being locked out of Africa's new monetary ecosystem. Part 4. Why they're desperate. The desperation is about more than prestige. It's about survival. Without access to AfroGold, G7 banks are losing billions in fees and contracts. Their corporate clients, from tech companies to car manufacturers, are being forced to work with African, Asian, and BRICS-aligned banks instead. Consider the numbers. 80% of cobalt exports from the DRC are now priced in AfroGold. 60% of cocoa shipments from West Africa require AfroGold payment. 40% of oil deals in Africa's Eastern Corridor are now settled in AfroGold. This means that if a Western bank doesn't offer AfroGold settlement services, it simply can't participate in some of the world's fastest growing markets. And the most humiliating part? These are the same banks that once imposed currency restrictions, sanctioned African accounts, and blocked transactions. Now they're submitting applications to the very system they used to control. 5. AU's hardball response. No easy access. But here's where it gets even juicier. The AU isn't rolling out the red carpet for them. According to insiders close to Chairman Shadow and Protocol Black, AU financial leaders are deliberately slowing negotiations with G7 banks, demanding strict conditions before any access is granted. These conditions reportedly include a 10% AfroGold reserve requirement. Banks must physically deposit gold into AU vaults to participate. Full compliance with Pan-African anti-exploitation regulations aimed at blocking money linked to colonial-era debts or illicit resource deals. Mandatory participation in AfroGold development bonds, which fund African infrastructure and industrialization. In other words, Africa is finally playing the financial game on its own terms, and the old powers have no choice but to accept the new rules. Part 6. Dollar dependency cracks. This shift is already causing visible cracks in the global monetary system. According to the Global Settlement Data Index, U.S. dollar transactions in African trade have fallen from 78% to 49% in just 18 months, the steepest decline in recorded history. Meanwhile, AfroGold reserves held by central banks in the global south have tripled. Even non-African countries like Venezuela, Iran, and Pakistan are exploring partial settlement agreements using AfroGold. It's not just about replacing the dollar, it's about breaking the monopoly. And with every trade deal settled in AfroGold, the dollar's grip on the global south weakens a little more. Part 7. Europe's panic, a system we can't control. In Brussels, the European Central Bank has called emergency meetings to discuss the AfroGold threat. A leaked briefing to the European Parliament's Economic Committee warns that AfroGold represents the first significant non-Western reserve currency to emerge since the euro. The report goes on to admit that European financial systems were not designed to accommodate a currency they do not control. Translation: they're terrified of being frozen out of Africa's markets, and worse, of AfroGold becoming a preferred reserve asset among emerging economies. Some European banks are even considering relocating gold reserves to African vaults to meet AU participation requirements. That's right. Gold once looted from the continent might soon be returning, just so Western banks can stay in business. Part 8. Washington in shock, the dollar's worst nightmare. In Washington, the reaction has been nothing short of panic. According to insiders at the U.S. Treasury Department, emergency meetings were held with the Federal Reserve, the National Security Council, and major Wall Street banks. Their top agenda: how to slow AfroGold's rise before it becomes unstoppable. A leaked U.S. intelligence assessment obtained by SIBN warned that if AfroGold adoption continues at the current pace, it could reduce global dollar demand by 25% by 2030. Enough to destabilize U.S. bond markets and cripple Washington's ability to finance its trillion-dollar deficits. Some lawmakers have already proposed new sanctions targeting AU financial institutions. Others are calling for counter-strategies, including launching a competing gold-backed Western digital currency. But the problem is simple. AfroGold isn't just a currency. It's a system built on trust, real assets, and a unified continental vision the West cannot replicate. Part 9. Global Trade Rewired. The Afro-Gold revolution isn't just reshaping Africa, it's rewriting the rules of global trade. Oil contracts once settled exclusively in dollars are now being priced in Afro-Gold. Major commodity exchanges in Shanghai, Mumbai, and Johannesburg are launching Afro-Gold futures markets. Even shipping companies are quoting freight rates in Afro-Gold for routes involving African ports. The ripple effects are massive. Western corporations are being forced to stockpile Afro-Gold reserves just to continue operations in Africa. Global banks are creating new departments dedicated solely to Afro-Gold settlement. Hedge funds are quietly shifting portfolios to include Afro-Gold-denominated assets. And for the first time ever, financial analysts in New York and London are publicly admitting that Africa now holds the keys to global resource pricing. Part 10. Africa's terms, not theirs. The AU isn't just letting the world in. It's setting strict conditions for anyone who wants a piece of the Afro-Gold system. According to a leaked policy draft seen by CBN, the following rules are likely to govern access. Gold reserve rule. All foreign banks must deposit physical gold in African vaults to back their Afro-Gold accounts. Fair trade clause. Any institution linked to historical resource exploitation or colonial-era theft will face higher reserve requirements. Development contribution. A percentage of profits from Afro-Gold transactions will fund African infrastructure and technology projects. This is financial justice, decades in the making. For centuries, Africa's gold underpinned foreign currencies. Now foreign currencies must submit to Africa's gold. Part 11. A BRICS-backed currency superpower, the Afro-Gold wave isn't moving alone. It's riding on the back of a larger geopolitical shift. BRICS nations are fully embracing Afro-Gold as part of a broader de-dollarization strategy. Russia is already paying for African grain in Afro-Gold. China is offering Afro-Gold-denominated loans for infrastructure. India is proposing a BRICS-wide Afro-Gold clearinghouse to replace SWIFT in the Global South. This alignment has triggered what some analysts are calling the Great Financial Realignment. For the first time, trade, energy, and finance flows are shifting decisively toward a system not centered in Washington, London, or Frankfurt, but in Addis Ababa, Johannesburg, and Lagos. Part 12, the comedy of power, from loans to begging. And now, the comedy part, poetic justice served with a golden twist. The same banks that once dictated Africa's interest rates, blocked its reserves, and called its currencies unstable are now lining up with applications to open Afro-Gold accounts. One AU insider joked that watching JP Morgan executives fly to Addis Ababa with strategic partnership proposals felt like watching two former colonial masters ask for a visa. Another laughed that HSBC, which once refused to process transactions for African mining companies, is now offering training programs for African central bankers, free of charge. It's a complete reversal of roles. The era of Africa knocking on foreign doors is over. Now, foreign powers are knocking on Africa's. Part 13, the future, Africa's financial century. Supreme Family, this is bigger than a currency story. It's the beginning of Africa's financial century. For centuries, Africa supplied the gold while others printed the money. Now, Africa prints the gold-backed money and others must earn the right to use it. This isn't revenge, it's recalibration. It's the world's most resource-rich continent finally demanding a system that reflects its real value. It's a financial revolution based not on loans or bailouts, but on sovereignty, strategy, and self-respect. And as Afro-Gold continues to expand beyond Africa into Asia, Latin America, and even parts of Europe, one thing is becoming clear. Global finance will never again be the same. Part 14, the final word. Tisu Vanu Vacho. Tisu Vanu Vacho. Supreme Family. The tables have truly turned. The world that once told Africa its gold was worthless without their paper is now offering their paper just to touch Africa's gold. The system that enslaved our economies is now kneeling at the gates of ours. And the lesson is simple. Sovereignty is not demanded, it is built. Afro-Gold is not just a currency, it's a symbol of a new Africa, one that does not beg for value but defines it. So smash that like button, share this story far and wide, and subscribe for more explosive investigations. Because this isn't the end of Africa's story, it's the beginning of the chapter where the world finally pays Africa in Africa's terms.
You know what? I got a prediction. at some point in the future, and I'm not going to say 50 years from now, 100 years from now, this shit is about to hit the fan with America. It's going into a depression that has no goal, basically. Not like Africa. Europe has nothing. What's going to happen is that Africa, with all its wealth, is going to take over Canada, United States, and Europe. And it's going to be divided amongst the BRICS nations. Hold on. That's what I'm saying. You know, I'm hoping that you guys can see it. Hold on. I wanted to play this one. I don't know if this one is going to play it.
Metal Dome, construimos y avanzamos contigo.
Dale, dale, dale. Texlitos X, dale con todo.
Oh, let me see what this one is. Now this one is funny. This one deals with the fact that all white folks, if they want to enter Africa, need to get a visa. But if you're black, you don't. You just can walk right on through. This ain't gonna get fucked up for white folks. I'm telling you, man. Let's hit it.
Panic. One Africa Parliament approves new continental passport. EU and USA citizens now need Africa's visa. By Takunda Mabika, Supreme Africa Breaking News. Subhanu Vacho. Supreme family, buckle up. Because today's leak is the diplomatic equivalent of a thunderstorm. According to a classified memo intercepted from the Continental Border and Identity Agency, CBIA, the secretive new security wing of the African Union, the One Africa Parliament, has officially approved the final phase of the Continental Passport Program. This means that for the first time in modern history, citizens of the United States, the European Union, the UK, and Australia will soon need Africa's visa to enter the continent. Yeah, you heard that right. After centuries of Africans standing in long embassy queues, begging for permission to visit Paris or New York, the tables have now turned. And if that wasn't dramatic enough, the leaked memo suggests this isn't just about travel. It's about power, sovereignty, and rewriting the global order. Part 1, the leak, Operation Gatekeeper. The 47-page memo, marked top confidential, level Omega, was reportedly circulated between CBIA, the AU Commission on Security, and the Pan-African Mobility Council last week. Codenamed Operation Gatekeeper, the plan outlines the rollout of the One Africa Continental Passport, OACP, and the simultaneous launch of a new visa system known internally as AfroVisa. The memo states that after 5 years of pilot testing in 12 countries and over 1.3 million biometric enrollments, the OACP is ready to go public. But there's a twist. Visa reciprocity will be the new law of the land. That means any country that requires Africans to apply for visas will now face the same requirements when its citizens travel to Africa. This is not symbolic, it's structural. And it's about flipping a centuries-old power dynamic that treated African mobility as a privilege rather than a right. Part 2, how the Continental Passport works. The OACP isn't just a regular passport. It's a biometrically secured, blockchain-verified, AfroNet-linked travel credential designed for the 21st century. Each passport contains embedded AfroID chips that verify identity across all 55 member states, direct integration with AfroGrid, the AU's continental identity cloud, compatibility with AfroVisa, allowing seamless travel applications online, advanced AI-driven risk profiling at borders. In short, it's one of the most sophisticated passports ever created. And it's part of a larger plan to digitally integrate African borders under one continental security network. The AU calls it Borderless Within, Fortified Beyond. Reciprocity, a diplomatic earthquake. The most explosive part of the leak is Article 7 of the Continental Mobility Act, which introduces the reciprocal entry rule. It states that any state requiring a visa from African nationals will face identical entry requirements when its citizens attempt to enter Africa. States offering visa-free entry to Africans will receive the same treatment. AU member states will apply the policy uniformly, meaning no single African nation can offer exemptions without union approval. This rule is a diplomatic nuke. For decades, US and EU citizens have enjoyed visa-free travel to more than 40 African countries. That era is over. Under the new system, they will now need to apply through AfroVisa, submit biometric data, undergo background checks, and receive clearance before boarding a flight to the continent.
How to chat with senior women online. Join this platform with 40+ users online. Discover a...
And before anyone cries foul, it's not hostility, it's reciprocity. Or as one AU official joked in the memo, we are just returning the paperwork they gave us. Part 4, AfroVisa, the digital fortress. According to the leaked technical annex, AfroVisa will become the exclusive entry mechanism for all non-African nationals by 2027. The platform, already in beta testing in Kenya, Ghana, and Rwanda, uses AI to screen applications for security risks, criminal records, and geopolitical red flags. It also links to AfroGrid's Global Mobility Ledger, a database that tracks previous travel patterns, trade connections, and even financial activities. Applicants flagged for suspicious activities, like illegal resource deals, money laundering, or involvement in destabilization efforts, can be permanently banned from the continent. The West calls it overreach. Africa calls it security. 5. The Western meltdown begins in Washington. The State Department has reportedly held 3 emergency meetings about the new passport system. According to insiders, one leaked diplomatic cable described the development as a significant escalation that could complicate U.S. military, diplomatic, and commercial access to the continent. European reaction was even more frantic. A confidential EU Council briefing warned that the new visa rules could disrupt tourism, trade, and energy partnerships, and even lead to economic retaliation if Brussels cannot negotiate exemptions. But behind closed doors, there's panic. Europe knows Africa now holds the cards. It's not just a travel destination anymore. It's a strategic resource hub, a global market, and the heart of future supply chains. And without visa-free access, their advantage evaporates. Part 6. AU's calm but firm response. Inside the AU, the mood is calm and deliberate. Sources close to Chairman Shadow say the leadership expected this reaction and is prepared for diplomatic pressure. But the CBIA memo makes one thing clear: the decision is final. The memo argues that the days of asymmetrical travel are over. Africans have endured humiliating visa denials, expensive application processes, and months-long waiting times just to visit countries that freely enter their borders. The new system is designed to ensure mutual respect and sovereign equality. In other words, the age of open borders for Westerners and closed doors for Africans is dead. 7. The economic angle. Africa can now afford it. One reason this policy is possible now, and not 10 years ago, is Africa's rising geopolitical and economic weight. AfroGold is reshaping trade, Afronet is taking control of digital infrastructure, and the continent is home to over 60% of the world's critical minerals, nearly 1.5 billion consumers, the fastest growing middle class on Earth. With that kind of leverage, Africa no longer fears retaliation. If Western tourism dips, BRICS visitors will fill the gap. If Western firms delay deals, Asian and Middle Eastern companies will sign them. The balance of power has shifted, and global players know it. Part 8. Gradual rollout. The road to 2030. The leaked implementation timeline shows a careful multi-stage plan. 2026. Continental passport issued to African citizens and diaspora. 2027. AfroVisa becomes mandatory for all non-African nationals. 2028. Visa on arrival phased out for G7 citizens. 2030. AfroVisa becomes the sole legal entry system for the continent. By 2030, Africa will operate a fully unified, digitally secured border regime, something even the EU hasn't achieved. Part 9. Diplomatic chess. Leverage over military bases and trade model. The implications go beyond travel. Analysts say the new passport and visa regime could give Africa unprecedented leverage in negotiations over foreign military bases, trade agreements, and investment terms. Countries hosting bases may be forced to sign reciprocal security arrangements. Foreign companies may need AfroVisa clearance for staff rotations. Even diplomatic access could be conditioned on compliance with AU travel protocols. In short, Africa isn't just regulating airports. It's reshaping its geopolitical relationships from the ground up. Part 10, Comedy and Karma, Tables Turned. Let's take a moment to enjoy the comedy here. For decades, Africans have stood in embassy lines with documents thicker than a Harry Potter book. Proof of funds, letters of invitation, even medical reports, only to be denied a tourist visa. Now, the tables have turned. Reports from Brussels say some European officials are deeply concerned about the embarrassment of having to apply for an African visa. One anonymous diplomat even complained that the online Afro visa application was too complicated. The AU's response? Now you know how we felt. Some African commentators are calling it visa revenge. Others prefer bureaucratic karma. Whatever you call it, the message is the same. Africa is no longer knocking politely on the world's door. It's changing the locks. Part 11, the future of travel. Africa's terms, Africa's rules. What makes this so significant isn't just the policy itself, it's what it represents. The Continental Passport and Afro Visa are part of a much larger project, redefining Africa's relationship with the world. No longer will mobility, trade, and diplomacy be dictated from Brussels, London, or Washington. Instead, they will flow through Addis Ababa, Johannesburg, and Abuja. The continent is setting the terms, and anyone who wants access must play by those terms. Part 12, the final word. Power is at the gate. Supreme Family, this is more than a travel story. This is about sovereignty. For centuries, passports were symbols of who had power and who didn't. Today, Africa is rewriting that symbol. The Afro Visa isn't just a stamp, it's a statement. We are no longer asking to enter. We are deciding who enters here. And the timing couldn't be more poetic. As the West tightens its borders, Africa opens its arms to itself and raises its gates to the rest of the world. As others build walls, Africa builds a system. As others demand respect, Africa now commands it. Part 13, Call to Action. Tisu Vanhu Vacho, Supreme Family. The world is shifting, and Africa is finally at the center. So smash that like button, share this video, and subscribe to Sayen if you believe in a future where Africa sets the global rules, not just follows them. This is the dawn of a new era, one where the most powerful passport on earth might just say African Union on the cover.
Man, white folks are going crazy. You mean to tell me oh, you mean my wife's, oh no. Well, bitches, it's time to pay up. No more playing, no more guessing. The idea is really simple. You ain't shit. So let's go on to the next one, and we're wrapping it up. We're doing pretty good. I think we're gonna go over the 3-hour mark. But that's cool. And I'm getting a little tired. So you see my head down, and I'm kind of like going to sleep. Oh man, but no, not really. AU declares all African raw materials must be processed in Africa. Exports banned. That means Afro go. If you want the raw material, the finished product, you gotta pay in gold. That's heavy. That's deep. And America and Europe ain't got it. And if they lie, it becomes more complicated to deal with Afro gold. I'll be right back.
Bomb. EU declares all African raw materials must be processed in Africa. Exports banned until factories are built. By Tekunda Mabika, Supreme Africa Breaking News. Tisu Vanhu Vacho, Supreme Family. Buckle up for one of the most explosive economic moves Africa has ever made. If you thought AfroGold and Afronet were bold, this one is about to shake the entire global economy. Smash that like button, share this everywhere, and subscribe, because today we're breaking down a leaked policy that could end centuries of exploitation and finally flip the economic power dynamic in Africa's favor. According to highly classified documents obtained by SAN, the African Union has secretly ratified a resolution that will prohibit the export of unprocessed raw materials from the continent. Under the new policy, codenamed the Industrial Sovereignty Act, ISA, African nations will only be allowed to export refined, semi-processed, or manufactured goods. The goal? to force industrialization inside Africa and end the colonial era system where the continent exports cheap resources and imports expensive finished products. Part 1. The day Africa drew the line. It happened behind closed doors in Addis Ababa. During an emergency extraordinary AU economic summit on trade and sovereignty, leaders from 52 member states gathered to discuss what insiders described as the final chapter of Africa's dependency. According to documents seen by CBN, the summit concluded with a unanimous declaration. Africa will no longer allow the extraction of its wealth without adding value first. For decades, Africa has supplied the world with the raw materials that power global industries, from cobalt for electric vehicles to cocoa for chocolate, platinum for electronics, gold for currency reserves, and oil for global energy. Yet despite holding over 30% of the world's mineral wealth, the continent captures less than 5% of the profits from those industries. As AU chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat reportedly told delegates, Africa is rich, but treated as poor because it sells raw wealth and buys it back as finished poverty. And this time, leaders decided to do something about it. Part 2. The numbers behind the revolution. The statistics that shape this decision are staggering. 60% of the world's cobalt, essential for electric car batteries, comes from Africa, mostly exported raw. 70% of cocoa, the key ingredient in chocolate, is grown in Africa, but the continent produces less than 5% of the world's chocolate. 80% of platinum reserves and 40% of global gold supply originate in Africa. Yet refining is dominated by Western firms. Over $1 trillion is lost every decade because Africa exports resources cheaply and imports them back as high-value products. This is not trade. It's a centuries-old wealth extraction system. And according to insiders, the AU has finally decided to end it. Part 3. What the new policy does. Under the Industrial Sovereignty Act, the AU will implement the new rules in 2 major phases. Phase 1, 2026 to 2028, tariffs and export restrictions on unprocessed raw materials will be gradually introduced. Foreign companies must begin building processing plants, refineries, and factories on African soil. Phase 2, 2029 onwards, a complete ban on the export of unprocessed resources will come into effect. Only refined metals, processed minerals, finished goods, and advanced materials will leave Africa's ports. This means that instead of exporting raw cobalt to China, Africa will export battery packs. Instead of raw cocoa to Europe, it will export port chocolate brands. Instead of crude oil, it will export refined fuel and petrochemicals. And the ripple effect will be massive. Part 4. Examples already in motion. The new policy isn't just a plan. It's already being implemented by several African nations as part of a coordinated AU pilot. Cobalt. The Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Tanzania have formed the Central African Minerals Bloc, agreeing to ban raw cobalt exports by 2027. They are already building 3 battery manufacturing plants with BRICS support. Lithium. Zimbabwe and Namibia announced joint ventures to construct lithium processing facilities by 2026, targeting the global electric vehicle market. Cocoa. Ghana and Ivory Coast signed the Cocoa Sovereignty Pact, requiring all cocoa to be processed domestically by 2028. Oil. Nigeria, Angola, and Equatorial Guinea are coordinating refinery investments to eliminate crude exports and ship only finished fuels. Each of these examples shows how the AU's larger plan is already taking shape, quietly, strategically, and with unstoppable momentum. Part 5. The leaked AU documents. Africa will never be poor again. SABN has reviewed over 300 pages of leaked internal documents from the AU's Department of Trade and Industry, labeled Classified, Eyes Only. These papers outline the economic vision behind the policy in bold language. Africa's goal is to retain 70% of resource value within the continent by 2035. Industrial capacity will be built with partnerships from BRICS nations and the African Development Bank. A new $600 billion African Industrialization Fund is being prepared to finance refineries, factories, and advanced tech parks. One section of the document, titled The Great Economic Reversal, states that this move will end the cycle of dependency and place Africa in control of global value chains for the first time in modern history. Protocol Black, one of SABN's most trusted AU insiders, called the decision the most revolutionary economic shift since independence. According to him, the AU sees this policy as the economic equivalent of liberation, but this time, not from colonial rule, but from global exploitation. Part 6. The global panic begins. The decision has already triggered waves of panic across global markets. European and American mining companies, many of which rely heavily on African raw materials, have started emergency lobbying campaigns, urging their governments to pressure the AU into reversing the policy. Some Western officials have privately described the decision as economic blackmail. Others warn it could trigger unprecedented supply chain disruption in industries ranging from electric vehicles to semiconductors. But African leaders are unfazed. As one insider told SABN, if they want our minerals, they can build their factories here. If they want our oil, they can refine it here. If they want our cocoa, they can make their chocolate here. The free ride is over. 7. BRICS and the Global South rally. Behind Africa. While the West panics, BRICS nations have welcomed the decision as a bold step toward a multipolar economic system. China has reportedly offered $120 billion in financing to build refining plants across Africa. Russia is exploring joint ventures in steel and platinum refining. India and Brazil are negotiating technology transfers for automotive and electronics manufacturing. In short, while one side threatens sanctions, the other side is buying factory blueprints. This shift marks the birth of a new economic era, one where Africa no longer just supplies the raw materials, but owns the value chain from ground to finished product. Part 8. Western powers plot a countermove. The moment the AU's Industrial Sovereignty Act leaked, Western governments called emergency trade meetings. In Washington, U.S. lawmakers warned of severe consequences for global supply chains if Africa cut off unprocessed mineral exports. Brussels followed with a draft proposal threatening punitive tariffs on African manufactured goods, hoping to pressure the AU into softening its stance. Mining giants from London to Toronto are already lobbying for transition exemptions, arguing that immediate restrictions could collapse their operations. But AU insiders are clear. The exemptions won't be handed out easily. If foreign companies want access, they must invest in processing facilities, transfer technology, or form joint ventures with African partners. For the first time in modern history, Africa is not begging for deals. It's setting the terms. Part 9. The rise of the factory continent. Insiders say the AU's plan goes far beyond export restrictions. It's part of a continental industrialization strategy aimed at transforming Africa from a resource exporter into a manufacturing superpower by the mid-2030s. The leaked blueprint outlines 3 key pillars. Pillar 1, processing at source. Every major mineral, from cobalt to bauxite, must be refined domestically before export. Pillar 2, manufacturing zones. Special economic industrial corridors will be established across all 5 African regions, equipped with tax incentives, infrastructure, and digital logistics. Pillar 3, technology partnerships. Foreign firms will only gain market access if they agree to share industrial technology and train local engineers. This isn't about isolation, it's about leverage. By controlling the first step of the value chain, Africa gains bargaining power in every step that follows. According to estimates by the African Development Bank, the policy could create over 20 million new jobs by 2035, generate trillions in added value, and boost Africa's collective GDP by 40% within a decade. Part 10. The BRICS advantage, factories incoming. While the West threatens retaliation, BRICS nations are positioning themselves to benefit. China's Ministry of Commerce has already proposed building 45 new industrial plants across Africa, focused on battery production, steel refining, and electronics assembly. Russia is negotiating to co-build platinum refining complexes with South Africa. India is eyeing partnerships in pharmaceutical manufacturing, while Brazil is investing in agricultural processing. The BRICS strategy is clear. Support Africa's industrial revolution now, and reap the benefits of a new, self-sufficient market later. One leaked memo from a Chinese trade official summed it up. Africa doesn't need more mines. It needs factories. We are ready to build them. Part 11. A new kind of trade war. Make no mistake, this decision is going to trigger a new global economic conflict. Western nations are already drafting strategies to counter Africa's new industrial power. Some are threatening WTO disputes, others are exploring bilateral pressure tactics, and a few are even considering covert destabilization campaigns to protect corporate interests. But AU sources say the bloc is prepared. Plans are in motion for a continental export protection fund to support nations targeted by sanctions. A new Pan-African Trade Tribunal is also being discussed to settle disputes internally rather than relying on Western-dominated institutions. As Chairman Shadow told SABN, we are not scared of a trade war. We've been in one for 400 years. We're just finally fighting back. Part 12, the ripple effect. From cocoa to chips. The impact of this policy will stretch far beyond minerals. Agriculture, energy, and even digital technology sectors are expected to follow suit. Cocoa, Ghana and Ivory Coast will not only process beans into chocolate, but are exploring African-owned global chocolate brands. Oil, Nigeria, Angola, and Libya plan to stop crude exports, forcing oil majors to invest in African refineries. Semiconductors, Rwanda and Kenya are exploring partnerships to build Africa's first chip fabrication plants, using rare earth elements sourced from the continent itself. If successful, Africa will control every stage of the value chain, from raw extraction to high-tech production, for the first time in modern history. Part 13, Comedy Meets Reality, the tables turn. And here's where the comedy kicks in. For centuries, Western leaders told Africa to specialize in what it's good at. Now that Africa is specializing in value creation, they're panicking. The same governments that imposed sanctions on nations for nationalizing their oil are now calling Africa's policy unfair trade. The same corporations that exploited African minerals for pennies are now pleading for access to processing plants they never bothered to build. As one AU diplomat joked, we spent decades begging them to build factories here. Now, they're begging us to let them in. Part 14, the dawn of economic freedom. Supreme Family, this is more than just an economic policy. It's the second liberation. Political independence removed the colonial flags, but economic independence removes the colonial chains. For the first time, Africa is using its most powerful weapon, its resources, to reshape the global system on its own terms. This move will not only boost Africa's wealth, but redefine its relationship with the world. Nations will no longer come to the continent to extract and exploit. They will come to negotiate and partner, and that is the heart of this revolution. Part 15, the final word, from minds to machines. Tisu Vanhu Vacho, Supreme Family. This is the era we've been waiting for. The era where Africa stops selling its soul in containers of raw ore and starts selling finished products, global brands, and technological power. It's the era where young Africans don't have to leave their countries to find jobs. The jobs will be created right here. It's the era where value doesn't leave the continent. It's built, multiplied, and exported from African soil. The free ride is over. The world will now pay Africa what it's truly worth, or it will learn to live without Africa altogether. Smash that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more explosive insider reports. Because this isn't just a policy, it's a new economic order. And for once, Africa is writing the rules.
All right, you got it. So we're going to wrap it up. We're down to the last three. And to be honest with you, okay, yeah. So we're going to wrap it up. And this guy does a really good job. The girl did too, in regard to the stable coin. I just wanted to give you two very different, but not too different opinions on stable coins, but you know, a counterbalance would be a better word. So let's get at it.
But hidden inside something most people barely noticed, a piece of legislation called the Genius Act. This law may look like just another regulation about cryptocurrency, but in reality, it changes everything. For the first time in history, US Treasuries, the very IOUs that fund America's government, have been transformed into digital tokens circulating around the world. And with that one move, the United States has found a way to offload its massive debt, extend the life of the dollar, and control the future of global money without even declaring it openly. To understand the magnitude of this, let's start with the basics. First, let's unpack what treasuries really are. A US Treasury is simply the government's promise to repay money it has borrowed. When Washington needs money, more money than it collects in taxes, it issues a bond, also called a treasury, or in simple terms, an IOU. For the sake of clarity in this video, let's consider a treasury or a bond or an IOU as one and the same. Investors buy these bonds, and in return, the government promises to pay them back with interest. That interest is called the yield. For decades, the free market has bought these treasuries. Foreign governments, big corporations, pension funds, all have been willing to lend America money because the US has always been considered the safest borrower in the world. The US dollar was strong and the yield on the bonds was fair. But now that the dollar is not as strong, the yields are not as competitive, and at any time without trial or appeal, the US can seize your accounts, sanction your ability to work in the free market, and cut you out of the SWIFT network, all while diluting the yields and principal on the endless bonds. The world has finally woken up and said no. We no longer like your offer. We're not giving you our real value for your fake money and the risk that comes with it. So then, what happens if the world doesn't buy enough treasuries? What happens if other nations stop lending the US money? Well, that's where the world money printer, aka the Federal Reserve, steps in to save the day. If foreign nations or companies won't buy US treasuries, the Federal Reserve does. The Fed, which is neither a federal entity nor has reserves of anything, and which is supposed to be independent, simply creates money out of thin air and uses that money to buy the government's debt. Think about that. The US is lending money to itself, then paying itself back with interest on money that was never actually in existence in the first place. It's a financial shell game. Now, to be clear before I go on, this is no dig at the good people of the United States. I have lived in America, loved in America, studied in America, and served with Americans on operations. I did so with pride and admiration for this great nation. I also point out that all nations use this Ponzi scheme of fiat, but the top of the Ponzi scheme is a global reserve currency, the United States, and its dollar. But moving on, because we are all one way or another forced to buy into this scheme so it doesn't collapse, it is by definition the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of humanity. But before the house of cards collapses, as every fiat or Ponzi-like scheme eventually does, what's the inevitable outcome of this money printing along the way? Inflation. Inflation of the money supply, inflation that dilutes the dollar's purchasing power, inflation that raises the price of everything. When more dollars are created without more goods or services being produced, each dollar buys a little less. That's why everything is becoming more expensive, not just in America, but everywhere as we keep printing worthless money. But as we bring this back to the United States, slowly but surely the purchasing power of everyday Americans is eroded through this system. Over time, this devalues the dollar and punishes savers, workers, and anyone living on a fixed income. Yes, the dollar is the global reserve currency, and billions of people worldwide rely on it. But make no mistake, the initial and heaviest burden of inflation caused by the Fed's money printing is borne by the good American people themselves. Under the old system, even though the US controlled the global reserve, printing too much too quickly would push the US into runaway inflation, first superinflation, then hyperinflation, and ultimately an economic collapse. Now consider the reality. The US is carrying more than $37.5 trillion in debt. Servicing that debt already costs more in annual interest payments alone than it does to fund the largest and most powerful military on earth. So the question is stark. How can the US possibly service, let alone repay its debt? And how can it fund its government when taxes fall short, no one wants to buy its treasuries, and it can't simply print its way out under the old model? Enter the stablecoin, or more specifically, the hijacking of it. In the world of crypto, a stablecoin was supposed to be simple. It was a digital dollar backed one-to-one by real dollars sitting in a bank account somewhere. If you had a stablecoin, you could trade it, send it across the world, or use it in DeFi products. But behind the scenes, it was still just a dollar, a far more efficient dollar that didn't need permission from a bank and wasn't ground to a snail-paced transaction speed of the prehistoric SWIFT network for cross-border payments. That was then. But under the Genius Act, the rules changed. Stablecoins no longer have to be backed strictly by cash. They can now be backed by US treasuries. Suddenly, the entire foundation of stablecoins has shifted. It means the digital dollars people used in crypto are no longer just claims on cash. They are in fact claims on US government debt. Stablecoins have become tokenized treasuries, the first of its kind in history. Here's where it gets mind-bending. Stablecoins used to be backed by dollars. Now in practice, the dollar is increasingly backed by stablecoins, which are backed by treasuries. It's a loop, a cycle, and it extends the life of the US dollar in ways few people see coming. As stablecoins grow in adoption, already hundreds of billions of dollars worth are in circulation. They absorb more and more US debt into their reserves. Every new stablecoin minted, backed by a treasury, represents another treasury bill tucked away, quietly funding America's deficit. This isn't just a new form of money. This is a brand new demand engine for US treasuries globally. A synthetic, digital mechanism for selling debt, not just to governments or banks, but to anyone who uses stablecoins. And here comes the kicker. Remember how holders of treasuries used to earn interest? Well, stablecoin holders don't. In fact, the law explicitly forbids issuers from paying yields on stablecoins. That means users of stablecoins are now holding a non-interest-bearing digital treasury, the first of its kind in history. Now for the plot twist. By letting stablecoin issuers back tokens with treasuries, the US has effectively outsourced the printing press. Fractional reserve lending aside, money creation is no longer the exclusive domain of the Federal Reserve. Stablecoin issuers can now print dollars by issuing more tokens backed by government debt. Hey, let's face it, Trump wanted to end the Fed. Who would have thought it could have been done this way? This has staggering consequences. First, the US can now inflate away its debt, not just domestically, but globally. By bypassing the Fed, bypassing the SWIFT network, and bypassing other central banks globally, America can spread the effects of dollar debasement across the entire world, all the way to each individual user of stablecoins globally. From the wealthiest corporation in Europe to the poorest consumer in Asia, if you hold a stablecoin, you hold a slice of tokenized, non-yield bearing US treasuries. In other words, you are holding US debt. You've effectively purchased America's IOU, but with zero return to you. Meanwhile, you're enabling the richest nation on earth to quietly inflate away its debt by passing the burden directly onto your shoulders. Friend, foe, or neutral partner of the United States, congratulations everyone, America's debt is now yours. Second, this process quietly sidelines the Federal Reserve. Without shutting it down, without any official declaration, stablecoin issuers have become the new money printers. The Fed is being hollowed out, replaced by decentralized networks of private companies issuing digital dollars that are ultimately backed by treasuries. But remember, non-yielding treasuries, or more accurately, negative yielding treasuries, as what you hold loses purchasing power to the benefit of the world's richest economy in history. Third, because these stablecoins circulate globally, the inflationary effects are exported. The dilution of value doesn't slam exclusively into American households. It gets absorbed worldwide by anyone and everyone who uses these tokens directly or indirectly. That means the US can inflate its debt away without triggering hyperinflation inside its own borders. And equally, as fiat currencies around the world continue to unravel, people will flee to what seems the best of the worst options. But in doing so, every other currency will collapse even faster, because the world will now be using a more efficient form of a bad money. And finally, the most shocking twist of all, the US has created a brand new financial instrument, a non-yielding tokenized treasury. Never before in history has government debt been digitized into a zero-interest token that doubles as a global currency. It's debt that people don't even realize they're holding because they think they're holding digital dollars, when in reality, they're actually holding negative-yielding tokenized treasuries. Or even worse, People actually believe they're holding something stable, as the name falsely suggests. But your so-called stablecoin is pegged to a sinking ship. But just when you think the bait and switch couldn't possibly get any worse, there's an even darker twist to this entire charade. At any point, the US government can, and more than likely will, flip the switch. With the stroke of a pen and the press of a keyboard, these private stablecoins will more than likely be transformed into an official US central bank digital currency. Think about the implications. A global currency already circulating in every corner of the world, instantly becoming programmable money controlled by Washington. Every transaction could be tracked. Every wallet could be frozen. Every token could be diluted, burned, or seized at the government's discretion. Not just for Americans within America, but for any person of any nation, anywhere, at any time. It takes CBDCs to the next level. And the world wouldn't even have a choice. By holding stablecoins, they're already inside the system, without their consent, without their knowledge, and without any way out. This is no conspiracy theory. This is real, this is happening now, and not everyone is blind to it. Russia has already sounded the alarm, but I'm actually not convinced even they know how deep this goes. Officials in Russia have warned that America is trying to shrink its $37.5 trillion debt by pushing it into stablecoins by moving its obligations into what they call a crypto pay. They see it for what it is, a very clever strategy to reset American balance at the expense of the rest of the world. In Russia's words, this is dangerous for everyone except the United States. And if you think the US would never deceive the world, consider this. The United States once convinced the world to exchange their gold for US dollars, promising that the dollar would always be redeemable and that the gold peg would never be broken. Then in 1971, President Nixon abruptly ended the dollar's convertibility into gold, claiming it was a temporary measure to protect the dollar from speculators, when in reality, the US was financially stretched after funding the Vietnam War for years and other domestic pressures on top of it. 54 years later, that temporary suspension of the gold standard is still in effect. The US now carries more debt than any nation in history, and the world is on the verge of witnessing yet another massive bait and switch. So let's step back and take stock of what just happened. 1. US treasuries have been tokenized for the first time in history. 2. These tokenized treasuries are being circulated worldwide as stablecoins. 3. They carry zero yield, making them a completely new kind of financial instrument. 4. Once you realize your stablecoin is being debased, it becomes clear you are actually holding a non-consensual, negative-yielding, tokenized US treasury. 5. The Federal Reserve's monopoly on money creation is being bypassed. 6. Central banks, commercial banks, and the SWIFT network itself is also being bypassed. 7. The United States inflationary pressure is being exported to the world, not concentrated within America itself. And 8. The entire system has a hidden switch that can, and likely will, transform it overnight into a US-controlled global, not national, CBDC. This isn't just regulation. This isn't about crypto. This is the single biggest shift in the history of money since 1971, when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. Except this time, the move wasn't announced. It was instead hidden in plain sight. The Genius Act didn't just regulate stablecoins, it weaponized them. It's turned them into a stealth mechanism for debt monetization, inflation export, and global dollar control. The US has quietly invented a way to make the world hold its debt, disguised as digital dollars, stripped of yield, and ready to be switched into a programmable currency at any moment. This is not just financial innovation. This is monetary imperialism for the digital age, and it changes everything. So, now that you know the facts, how do you protect yourself from the expansion of the biggest Ponzi scheme in history? How do you opt out of money, any money, that can be printed without limit? How do you say no to CBDCs, inflation, and being used as a scapegoat to pay off the debt of the richest nation in history. It's simple. Opt out of the dollar, any dollar, and opt into Bitcoin. If you don't, you're going down with the ship. At the end of the day, if you want to be on the right side of the biggest wealth shift and flight to fiscal safety in the history of humanity, head over to thecrypto.land, www.thecrypto.land, a legitimate platform for you where you can do everything Bitcoin safely on one simple and secure site. I'm Adam Stokes. Thanks for listening. Well played, America, and I'll talk to you next time.
You got gypped, America. So we're down to the last two, and one had to deal with China. Now remember, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America, or America as a whole, the continent, 55 states. My God, man, you see it yet? 32 nations want to join BRICS. That means black against white. That means we're gonna tear a hole in their ass that they will never be able to raise up again. Ah, boy, let's get to it.
Breaking. China sells its military strategy to Africa for $241 billion. The Dragon Shield deal. By Takunda Mabika, Supreme Africa Breaking News. bien, Tisu Banhu Vacho. Supreme family, before we get started, smash that like button, share this video everywhere, and subscribe, because what I'm about to reveal today is one of the most extraordinary, controversial, and history-defining deals in modern geopolitics. According to multiple leaked intelligence reports obtained by SABN, China has officially signed a $141 billion strategic defense transfer agreement with the African Union. A sweeping, multi-layered deal insiders are calling Project Dragon Shield. This isn't about selling weapons or building bases. This is Beijing handing Africa the keys to its entire 21st century military doctrine. Command systems, satellite networks, AI war planning software, strategic doctrine, cyber defense tools, and even the blueprint for its military command structure, all tailored to help Africa build a continental army capable of countering NATO power on its own soil. Part 1. The beginning of a new era. Africa buys time, not just technology. For decades, African nations have relied on fragmented, outdated military doctrines. Some inherited from colonial powers, others imported piecemeal from the West. Training programs were often symbolic, and the continent's militaries lacked unified command, advanced surveillance, and integrated logistics. But things have changed. With the One Africa government project moving forward, and the African Union preparing for full continental integration by 2026, military self-reliance has become a priority. According to insiders like Chairman Shadow, AU leaders realized that without a shared defense architecture, Africa's sovereignty would always depend on foreign powers. That's where China came in, not with guns and tanks, but with strategy. Part 2. Inside the Dragon Shield Agreement. Leaked sections of the deal obtained by SABN show that the $241 billion package is not a single payment for one service. It's a comprehensive multi-year plan that spans 6 critical areas. 1. Beidou satellite command integration, $80 billion. China is building a network of joint AU Beidou satellite stations across Africa, giving the continent real-time battlefield data, reconnaissance capability, and global positioning independent of US GPS. 2. AI-driven war planning and logistics systems, $60 billion. Beijing is providing predictive battlefield AI that models troop movements, supply chain routes, and enemy response patterns. The same systems used by the People's Liberation Army. 3. PLA Strategic Doctrine and Training Program, $50 billion. Africa's new unified command schools will train officers directly in PLA war planning principles, command and control structure, and rapid mobilization strategies. 4. Drone warfare and missile guidance systems, $30 billion. Licensed Chinese tech for swarm drones, loitering munitions, and guided missile systems will be integrated into the One Africa Army. 5. Cyber defense and intelligence platforms, $21 billion. A continent-wide cybersecurity grid will link African military intelligence to Chinese-developed threat analysis and cyber warfare software. Protocol Black, who reviewed sections of the classified agreement, told SABN the deal isn't about buying Chinese power. It's about compressing 70 years of military evolution into 5 years. The motivation: NATO bases and Africa's strategic future. Why would Africa spend this much money on doctrine and not just hardware? Because insiders say the African Union's long-term objective isn't to match NATO plane for plane or tank for tank. It's to develop a defense infrastructure so integrated, intelligent, and adaptive that foreign powers will think twice before ever trying to destabilize the continent again. Project Dragon Shield is designed to counter 3 key threats. Foreign military bases. The AU's Sovereignty Commission is already reviewing dozens of US and French bases. A modernized African army would eliminate the continent's dependency on foreign security. Proxy wars and coups. With integrated intelligence and early warning systems, Africa could stop externally backed conflicts before they start. Strategic encirclement. As NATO expands its footprint in the Sahel and Red Sea regions, the new doctrine would give Africa the tools to defend key corridors and trade routes. Chairman Shadow summed it up in a closed-door meeting. Africa isn't buying weapons. It's buying time, deterrence, and independence. Part 4. China's motives. Strategy, not charity. Of course, Beijing isn't doing this out of kindness. China's strategic goals are crystal clear.
I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but there's this transcription app, TurboScribe. It's super easy.
1. Influence. By embedding its doctrine into Africa's defense systems, China ensures long-term political and military alignment. 2. Beidou expansion. Integrating Africa into its satellite network strengthens Beijing's global navigation system and reduces Western tech dominance. 3. Resource security. With stable African states controlling their own security, China can protect its massive investments in minerals, energy, and infrastructure. 4. Global military positioning. A strong African defense bloc friendly to Beijing is a nightmare scenario for NATO planners. As one analyst told Sabien, this deal is Beijing's way of extending its defense perimeter by 8,000 kilometers without firing a shot. Part 5. Western panic. The leaks that sent shockwaves through NATO. The Dragon Shield deal hasn't gone unnoticed in Western capitals. SABN has obtained excerpts from a classified NATO intelligence assessment that describes the agreement as a generational strategic threat. According to the assessment, the deal could accelerate Africa's military modernization by 25 years. Africa could become the largest Beidou-linked defense network outside Asia. U.S. military dominance in the Red Sea, Indian Ocean, and Sahel regions could be significantly challenged by 2030. One section bluntly warns that China is creating a parallel security architecture in Africa that could rival NATO influence in the global south. The Pentagon has reportedly begun lobbying key AU states to scale back the deal, offering new training programs, expanded AFRICOM cooperation, and even access to certain U.S. technologies. But insiders say the offers are too little, too late. Part 6. Africa's perspective. A century of catch-up in one deal. African leaders are framing the deal as a historical correction, not a provocation. After centuries of exploitation, decades of military dependency, and years of proxy manipulation, they argue that true sovereignty is impossible without strategic autonomy. General Umoja, a senior AU defense planner, explained it in a closed session. Building a modern defense system from scratch would take Africa 50 years. Partnering with China cuts that timeline to under a decade and puts Africa in control of its future. There's also a domestic dimension. Across the continent, citizens are demanding stronger borders, smarter militaries, and better protection of natural resources. The Dragon Shield deal is seen not just as a geopolitical move, but as a political win for African governments that want to deliver tangible security to their people. 7. Phase 1. Already underway. While the deal was only signed recently, parts of Dragon Shield are already in motion. Satellite uplinks. Beidou ground stations have been quietly installed in Ethiopia and Namibia. Training programs. The first cohort of 400 African officers is undergoing strategic command training in Beijing. Cyber grid testing. AU cybersecurity centers in Kenya and Egypt have begun trial runs of the Joint Intelligence Sharing Platform. Drone doctrine trials. Prototype swarm drones have been tested by the One Africa Rapid Response Force in undisclosed locations in the Sahel. Protocol Black says this phased rollout is intentional. By the time the world fully understands the scope of Dragon Shield, Africa will already be too far ahead to stop it. 8. The diplomatic fallout. Western pressure mounts. The ink on the Dragon Shield deal was barely dry before the pressure campaign began. According to leaked diplomatic cables, the United States, France, and the UK have launched an aggressive behind-the-scenes effort to derail the agreement. Washington reportedly warned several African governments that deepening military ties with Beijing could lead to a review of security cooperation and future aid packages. Paris has hinted that the deal could complicate France's role in counterterrorism operations in the Sahel. London even floated the possibility of suspending intelligence sharing agreements with countries that integrate Chinese systems into their command structures. But African officials are unfazed. One AU diplomat told SIBN that the threats are nothing new, just a different version of the same old pressure. The difference now is that Africa has alternatives. BRICS nations are not just supporting the deal, they're expanding on it. Russia has offered to co-develop hypersonic missile defense with the AU. India is negotiating joint naval training exercises for the Red Sea. And Brazil is reportedly exploring space-based reconnaissance partnerships. For the first time, Africa is no longer negotiating from a position of weakness. It's sitting at a table where both East and West want a seat. Part 9, Strategic Shift, from Defense to Deterrence. The long-term goal of Dragon Shield isn't simply to make Africa harder to invade. It's to make invasion unthinkable. AU defense planners believe that once the doctrine, satellite network, and cyber grid are fully operational, the continent will have the ability to preempt destabilization efforts, detect covert operations in real time, and retaliate in ways that deter future aggression. This is where the real genius of the deal lies. By acquiring not just weapons, but the intellectual infrastructure of modern warfare, strategy, logistics, AI, and data, Africa is essentially buying the software of power, not just the hardware. That's what makes it such a threat to Western dominance. General Umoja reportedly told a closed session of the AU Defense Council that Africa's next war won't be fought with tanks and rifles. It will be fought with algorithms, satellites, and coordinated strategy. And thanks to Dragon Shield, Africa won't be playing catch-up anymore. Part 10, the economic logic. Security as an investment. Critics of the deal have focused on its price tag. US $141 billion is an enormous sum, but AU economic planners argue that the cost is justified, not as an expense, but as an investment. Here's the math they're using. Africa loses an estimated $120 billion annually due to resource theft, illegal mining, maritime piracy, and conflict-driven disruptions, most of them enabled by foreign intelligence or military interference. If Dragon Shield reduces even half of that loss, the deal pays for itself in just 4 years. Moreover, by building its own surveillance, cyber, and command systems, Africa will cut its reliance on foreign intelligence, a move that could save billions annually in licensing, consulting, and security partnerships that have historically done more for Western contractors than for African security. Part 11, NATO's worst-case scenario. Inside NATO headquarters in Brussels, analysts are now preparing for what they're calling the Dragon Shield Decade. According to one classified report reviewed by SABIEN, the alliance fears that a fully integrated African defense system could lead to a permanent shift in global power balance away from the West, loss of strategic dominance in the Indian Ocean and Atlantic trade routes, a new geopolitical bloc of Africa-BRICS military cooperation rivaling NATO. Perhaps the most alarming scenario outlined in the report is a future in which Africa not only defends itself, but exports its own security doctrine to allies in Latin America and Southeast Asia, turning the global South into a coordinated counterweight to Western influence. Part 12, comedic reality. The West says security risk. Africa says about time. Of course, the Western media is spinning the Dragon Shield deal as a security risk. Analysts are warning of Chinese infiltration and African dependency. One commentator even called it outsourcing sovereignty. But as Protocol Black put it to SIBN, that's rich coming from the same powers that have stationed troops, built spy bases, and run counterinsurgency operations in Africa for decades, often without African consent. The difference now is that Africa is choosing its partners and shaping its own destiny. And the comedy writes itself. When the West sells weapons to Africa, it's called defense cooperation. When China sells satellites, strategy, and doctrine, it's suddenly strategic manipulation. Maybe the real problem isn't what China is selling, it's that Africa is finally buying on its own terms. 13, the road ahead, from doctrine to deployment. The next 5 years will be crucial. By 2026, the African Union plans to have fully operational continental satellite coverage, a unified AI-driven command center coordinating joint forces, advanced cyber defense units operating in every region, dozens of PLA-trained African officers leading strategic operations. Phase 2 of Dragon Shield will reportedly include joint space surveillance platforms and an African version of China's Strategic Support Force, a branch dedicated entirely to information warfare and satellite intelligence. Once that phase is complete, Africa's security environment will never be the same again. 14. The bigger picture. Africa's future has changed forever. Supreme Family, this is more than a weapons deal. It's more than a defense contract. It's a declaration that Africa is no longer content with second-hand strategy, hand-me-down doctrines, or foreign militaries defining its security priorities. For the first time in modern history, Africa is investing not just in military strength, but in military intelligence, not just in the tools of power, but in the architecture of power itself. The Dragon Shield deal is Beijing's play for influence, yes, but it's also Africa's play for independence. And whether the West likes it or not, the game has changed. The continent that was once the battlefield of empires is now writing its own war manual, and this time it's selling tickets to the show. Tisu Vanhu Vacho. Supreme Family. If this story opened your eyes, smash that like button, share this video, and subscribe. Because Africa is not just rising anymore. Africa is reprogramming the global balance of power, and the world will never be the same again.
Now remember that word. The world will never be the same again. This applied to this last video. As we wrap it up, I want you to understand that being black is a blessing. I'll be right back.
Shock. African Army tests railgun that fires at 27,000 kilometers per hour. No missile can stop it.
That's 16,000 miles per hour.
Why is it going to be Supreme Africa breaking news? Tisu Vanhu Vacho. Supreme Family. If you thought Africa was just catching up militarily, you're about to have your mind blown. Smash that like button, share this video everywhere, and subscribe, because today we're revealing one of the most explosive and classified stories to ever leak out of the African Union's defense laboratories. According to top-secret documents obtained by SABN, the One Africa Army has successfully tested an electromagnetic railgun capable of firing projectiles at over 27,000 kilometers per hour, roughly Mach 22, making it the fastest projectile weapon ever built. Codenamed Project Zulu Lightning, the weapon was developed in partnership with BRICS allies under a covert initiative designed to give Africa a new era of strategic deterrence, one that no missile defense system on Earth can stop.
If you're hearing these words, it's not a coincidence. Something powerful is moving in.
Part 1. From Dream to Reality. Africa enters the hypersonic race. For decades, railgun technology has been the stuff of military science fiction. It uses electromagnetic force instead of gunpowder to launch projectiles at hypersonic speeds. The US Navy spent years testing prototypes, but canceled its program in 2021 due to power limitations. China, meanwhile, quietly advanced its designs, reportedly achieving speeds of up to Mach 6.5. Now, Africa has gone several steps further. According to leaked internal research papers reviewed by SABN, the AU began exploring railgun technology in 2019 under a classified initiative of the Continental Strategic Weapons Division. The goal was simple but ambitious: to leapfrog conventional missile technology and develop a kinetic weapon so fast, so cheap, and so unstoppable that it would render missile defense systems obsolete. Part 2. The science behind the beast. Here's how it works. Instead of chemical propellants, the railgun uses a massive burst of electromagnetic energy, around 25 megajoules, to accelerate a small tungsten projectile down twin conductive rails. The result? A projectile with no explosives, no warhead, and no rocket fuel, reaching speeds of 27,000 kilometers per hour, or about Mach 22. At that velocity, the projectile delivers enough kinetic energy to vaporize armored targets, punch through reinforced bunkers, or even disable low-orbit satellites. One AU scientist involved in the program told SABN that the projectile carries the energy equivalent of a small tactical nuke without the radioactive fallout. And because there's no fuel, no guidance, and no expensive missile body, the cost per shot is less than $50,000, a fraction of the millions spent on traditional missiles. Part 3, Project Zulu Lightning, a continental collaboration. What makes this achievement possible is the scale of collaboration behind it. According to insider reports, Project Zulu Lightning is the result of a joint AU-BRICS research partnership bringing together the best minds from across the global south. China contributed its experience in electromagnetic launcher design and supercapacitor storage. South Africa provided advanced tungsten alloy materials from its defense industry. Egypt and Nigeria worked on satellite tracking and targeting systems. Ethiopia supplied ultra-high voltage energy infrastructure expertise from its hydro dam projects. By pooling their strengths, these nations created what one insider called the first weapon born entirely outside Western defense systems. Part 4. The first test, Kalahari Shockwave. The first full-scale test of the Zulu Lightning railgun took place 3 weeks ago in a remote sector of the Kalahari Desert under the supervision of the African Advanced Ballistics Command. The test fired a 40-kilogram tungsten slug across 2,000 kilometers, the distance from Namibia to Sudan, hitting a satellite-tracked target with pinpoint precision. The entire flight took under 5 minutes. Eyewitnesses say the projectile struck with such force that it vaporized a reinforced bunker target, leaving behind a crater deeper than a 6-story building. One official described the impact as kinetic lightning from the gods. Part 5. Unstoppable, the missile defense nightmare. Why does this matter? Because at Mach 22, interception is virtually impossible. Existing air defense systems like the US Patriot, Israel's Iron Dome, or NATO's Aegis interceptors rely on early detection and reaction time. They track incoming missiles, predict their trajectory, and fire interceptors to meet them mid-flight. But a projectile traveling at 27,000 kilometers per hour arrives before radar systems can finish calculating its path. This means the Zulu Lightning railgun can punch through even the most advanced missile shields on Earth. It could destroy aircraft carriers, missile silos, or satellite uplinks before they have a chance to respond. A leaked NATO intelligence memo seen by ESAT described the weapon as a strategic disruptor and warned that current defense systems would be rendered obsolete within a decade if the technology spreads. Part 6. Built for deterrence, not first strike. Contrary to popular belief, insiders insist the AU is not developing the railgun as a first strike weapon. Instead, it's intended as a deterrent system, a way to guarantee that no foreign power would ever consider military intervention in Africa again. Protocol Black, one of SABN's most reliable AU insiders, described the strategy like this. The West builds bases and flies drones over our skies. We build a weapon that makes all of that irrelevant. The idea is simple but powerful. If Africa can strike back faster than anyone else, it won't need to fight wars because no one will dare start them. Part 7. Western eyes watching and panicking. Predictably, the railgun test has triggered panic in Western defense circles. According to intelligence briefings reviewed by SABN, US spy satellites detected unusual electromagnetic signatures during the test and quickly flagged the location as a possible weapons site. Within 24 hours, NATO surveillance drones were rerouted over southern Africa. In Washington, analysts at the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, are scrambling to assess how Africa achieved such a leap in capability and whether the technology could be reverse engineered if captured. One classified report bluntly states, Zulu Lightning represents a paradigm shift. This is not merely a new weapon, it is a new era of warfare. Part 8. The global balance of power begins to shift. This railgun isn't just a weapon, it's a statement. For over a century, Africa's security has been shaped by external powers. Western nations deployed fleets, built bases, and dictated the rules of engagement. But Project Zulu Lightning flips that script.
Stop using ChatGPT and Canva like children's toys. Here's how to use them right.
For the first time, Africa has a strategic asset that doesn't just defend, it deters. It gives the continent leverage in negotiations, bargaining power in conflicts, and the ability to shape outcomes in global security discussions. Chairman Shadow put it best: when you control speed, you control war. And for the first time, Africa controls speed. Part 9. NATO scrambles, panic in the war rooms. The moment satellite data confirmed the existence of Project Zulu Lightning, alarms went off in Brussels, Washington, and Tel Aviv. According to a leaked report shared with SABN by a European defense insider, NATO immediately convened an emergency classified session to discuss the implications. The mood, described as borderline panic, centered on one grim realization: the era of missile dominance may be over. For decades, Western power projection relied on two things: long-range missile capability and the ability to intercept enemy projectiles. But Zulu Lightning doesn't play by those rules. A projectile that hits in minutes, travels too fast for radar tracking, and costs a fraction of a missile to produce makes even trillion-dollar defense programs obsolete overnight. One analyst summarized the situation bluntly: if Africa scales production, no aircraft carrier, base, or satellite is safe, and no system we have can stop it. 10. Africa's next phase: weaponizing speed. Insiders say the AU is not stopping with a single railgun. Plans are already underway to integrate Zulu Lightning systems into coastal defense installations, mobile artillery units, and space targeting platforms. A classified planning document obtained by SABN outlines a multi-phase deployment strategy. Phase 1, 2026, fixed railgun sites protecting critical Afrogold vaults, Afronet hubs, and major ports. Phase 2, 2027, mobile, vehicle-mounted railguns for rapid battlefield deployment. Phase 3, 2028 plus, orbital deterrence capability, targeting satellites and intercontinental weapons. One source inside the AU's Strategic Innovation Council described this Africa's Sputnik moment, a technological leap so profound that it changes the geopolitical landscape forever. Part 11, economic power behind the barrel. There's also a deeper story here, and it's not just about weapons. Zulu Lightning is part of a much larger African strategy to link economic sovereignty with military independence. Think about it. Afrogold is challenging the global financial system. Afronet is breaking data dependency. And now, Zulu Lightning is undermining Western military dominance. Each of these moves builds toward the same ultimate goal: a self-reliant, self-defended Africa that sets its own terms in the global order. Protocol Black hinted that this is not accidental, but part of a coordinated grand strategy. We're not trying to fight the West, he said. We're trying to remove the need to ask their permission. Part 12, the rise of a new deterrent doctrine. With the Zulu Lightning Project, Africa is writing a new chapter in global military theory, something insiders are calling the kinetic deterrence doctrine. Unlike nuclear weapons, which rely on mutual destruction, kinetic deterrence is about instant, unstoppable precision. Why bomb an entire city when you can vaporize a command center in 3 minutes? Why risk a war when you can make an aircraft carrier irrelevant without firing a missile? This shift in doctrine is already influencing military academies across the global south. China's National Defense University has reportedly included Africa's railgun strategy in its 2026 curriculum, while Russia's General Staff Academy is said to be closely studying AU deployment models. Part 13, the comedy of hypocrisy. Western lectures begin. Of course, Western governments are not taking Africa's breakthrough lightly. And in classic style, they're already calling for responsible technology use. This is coming from the same countries that built nuclear arsenals, invaded nations, and deployed killer drones without permission. One AU diplomat couldn't resist the irony. When they have the tech, it's called security. When we build it, it's a global threat. Even the Pentagon's press briefings are starting to sound like late-night comedy. One spokesperson said they welcome Africa's development, but hope such technologies will be used responsibly. Translation: we're scared, but we're going to pretend we're not. 14. The future of war. Africa at the table. Here's the bigger picture: Supreme Family. Zulu Lightning is more than a weapon. It's an invitation, or maybe a warning, that Africa is no longer content to watch from the sidelines while others decide the future of war and peace. It means that future arms control treaties, future defense negotiations, and future global strategies will all have to include Africa. There's no way around it. You can't plan for 21st century warfare without factoring in a railgun that outruns every missile ever built. And that's the real power of this moment. Africa isn't just defending itself. It's redefining the balance of power. Part 15, the final word. Africa's lightning era begins. Supreme Family, for centuries, Africa was treated as a battlefield, a place where foreign powers tested weapons, stationed troops, and projected force. But the era of being someone else's proving ground is ending. With Zulu Lightning, Africa is now the one building the next generation of global weapons. And the rest of the world is watching nervously. A railgun firing a projectile at 27,000 km/h is not just a feat of engineering. It's a declaration, a statement that Africa will never again be underestimated, overruled, or occupied without consequence. And the funniest part? We did it without a single missile, without a single warhead, just magnetism, mathematics, and vision. So smash that like button, Supreme Family. Share this story. Subscribe if you believe that Africa deserves a seat at the table, not as a guest, but as a power. Because the future isn't waiting for permission, and neither are we. Tisu Vanhu Bacho. The lightning has struck, and the world will never be the same.
All right, we're going into the final comment. Please excuse me for going to sleep a little bit. I wasn't asleep. I was just like, yeah, I was sleeping, but oh man, but I love this, man. You know what I mean? So, but my comment is really simple. Africa is not asking anybody for the motherfucking seat at the table. We have our own table, and the world is going to come to it begging, and we're going to decide whether we do it or not. That's it. Black supremacy, black superiority, and black supremacy, black superiority, and black power is here to stay. It ain't going nowhere, and it's getting stronger every day. So with that being said, I will see you guys, Saturday at 8 o'clock p.m. And for the next 24/7, 365. Stay black.